Welcome to the Drunken Boxing Podcast, coming to you from Beijing, China. I'm Byron Jacobs, and this is a new endeavor for me. Look, the premise of these podcasts is simple. It's a casual discussion with people who are involved in martial arts and related culture and lifestyle practices, while we have a few adult beverages, hence the name of the podcast. The main goal in doing these podcasts is to have people freely discuss their martial arts and anything else that comes to mind through the discussion in an as natural and relaxed atmosphere as possible. I'll be doing my best to host guests who are knowledgeable in their craft, but also those who have immersed themselves in the cultures that such practices have originated in. My guest today is Michael Ashley Wix, who is a student of Beijing Shuai Jiao legend Li Baoru. Mike is originally from New Zealand and has lived in Beijing for 23 years, learning various Chinese martial arts, including studying for 3 years at the Beijing University of Sport and studying Yi Quan for 5 years. He was involved in the early development of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA in China, and he also introduced Chinese wrestlers to the sport of MMA. I've known Mike for a few years, and he's a good friend of mine. We had a great discussion where he recounts his early exposure to Chinese martial arts, his first trip to China, and his subsequent experiences both within the wushu world and leading up to his involvement with Chinese wrestling and MMA. He shares some great old stories, so please give it up for my brother, Michael Ashley Wix. Okay, Mike. So, finally you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. So, we know each other through, oddly enough, non-Chinese martial arts connections. Jiu-Jitsu.
And right. Namely, Chet Quint.
That's it.
Chet Quint is an old friend of mine, and your first?
Yeah, my first Jiu-Jitsu teacher.
Yeah.
How did you meet Chet?
I met Chet. He came over to Beijing in, I have no idea, 2006 or 2005 or something like that, and he was teaching jiu-jitsu for Andy, and he was teaching all the early MMA fighters in China, so Zhang Tiequan and
Which Andy?
Andy P.
Oh, okay.
So Andy P brought him over, and Andy P was doing Art of War, and so Chet was teaching for him, and then later on Chet established his own school, and when he first arrived, I met him and we were talking, and he goes, "Mike, you know everyone. I want to learn Shuai Jiao." And I was like, "Why do you want to waste your time with Chinese martial arts, man?" And he goes, "No, Shuai Jiao is good. I've done it in America. I'm a black belt." And I was like, "Okay, whatever. I'll see what I can find." I found an old friend of mine, Zhao Yiping, who actually should get the credit for being the father of mixed martial arts in China.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Zhao Yiping,
is he still around?
I don't know. I'm sure he's still around, but I've asked a few people, "Hey, where is he? What's he doing?" And he's kind of a recluse now. He's not really engaged in the community at all.
So he's not like a religious recluse. He's
no. He's
withdrawn from.
He's just doing his own thing.
Okay.
So anyway, Zhao Yiping said to me, "Hey, Mike, I can introduce you to Li Baoru, who is a Shuai Jiao teacher here in Beijing."
Was this before Chet asked to meet?
No, Chet asked me, and I asked.
So you hadn't done Shuai Jiao then?
No.
Oh, okay. I
actually had done Shuai Jiao, but not seriously.
Right.
So Shuai Jiao was part of Sanda, and I'd also encountered Shuai Jiao and learned Shuai Jiao in Changzhou before that. But I didn't feel any passion for it, or I was like, well, this is not as good as jiu-jitsu.
But had you done jiu-jitsu before?
Yeah, I done jiu-jitsu from 99 through for years.
With Andy?
Yeah, with Andy. Yeah.
That's a very interesting. I didn't know Andy brought Chet out. Coming back to that.
Yeah.
Because Andy, I remember when he came to China, he was a blue belt, right?
Andy was a blue belt under Hoist Gracie.
Right,
when he came to China.
But that's when he settled in China. So
yeah,
and arguably at that time there was no one for him to learn or to progress with.
No. So basically, how jiu-jitsu started in China was Andy was a blue belt under Hoist. He came here, and he wanted to keep training. He wanted to keep learning. So he just got a bunch of bros together and started training. And We were all martial artists from different disciplines, and my background in wushu, and there was another guy who was just a street brawler, and another guy who was a sanda fighter, and the four of us would just come together and roll and learn what we could learn from Andy, and learn
from experience.
And learn through experience, and learn from what we could find on videos, and we were watching all the fights, and so we were really teaching ourselves. But along the way, we encountered a lot of really good teachers. So Roy Harris, for one, who came to China, and we went and we learned from Roy Harris, wow. And that was a real game changer for me and for all of us. That really put us back on the right track for jiu-jitsu. And over time, Andy really dedicated himself to promoting and building jiu-jitsu in China. And so we encountered a lot of Brazilians. So we had all the early Brazilian pride fighters come through and work out with us. We had Hicks and Gracie come and stay and work out with us.
Wow.
We had... all the ADCC fighters later on, they all came through.
Well, they had an ADCC here, but that was more what? That was like what?
Yeah. That was much
later,
ago? 2014 or whatever. Yeah. But they all came through Andy's place. So
actually, do you know anything about that ADCC being held here?
I went to it.
But how did it end up here?
I don't know the official story. All I know is that that was a period of time where everybody wanted to be involved with China. So I think that's what the starting point was. How do we get involved with China? And I knew that the money behind ADCC was also investing heavily in China and other business interests. So whenever there's an event like this is what a lot of people don't realize about martial arts events in China. They're not always about the martial art. The money behind the event is quite often about business deals. So let's say we put an event in Beijing, and I'm an investor behind that event, and I want to do some other business with another business person in Beijing, maybe somebody in the government, and I can use my investment in that event as a way to create a relationship with that person in the government or that other business on the Chinese side.
Yeah.
So, when we look at all those Sanda events and MMA events and all these other competitions we have across China, a lot of them are not just for the martial arts. The money behind it, there's business happening.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of things, not just martial arts, but a lot of events in China are similar.
Well, coming back to Shuai Jiao, man, so most people don't realize that, Shuai Jiao was the emperor of China in the late Qing dynasty. He had his own stable of Shuai Jiao wrestlers, right? And they were like the special forces. They were these tough guys, and they could protect the emperor. They could do all that sort of stuff. But one important function of those guys, the Shanpu Ying.
Yeah.
You know what it means, right? Shanpu means like people who are good at throwing other people,
right.
People who are good at wrestling. So the Shanpu Ying, one important role they had was not military. It was diplomatic. So
that would make sense.
Yeah. So when you have to create a relationship with, say, some Mongolian warlord or some Mongolian tribal leader, you go and you take your wrestlers and you sit down and you say, your wrestlers against my wrestlers, and let's drink and eat and watch the wrestlers, and then in that process we create a closer relationship. So those Shanpu Ying guys actually had that function as diplomats in that respect. And today, with Sanda, with MMA, we're athletes, we're fighters, we do what we love, but we're still in that role to a certain degree in China. Maybe to a lesser degree outside of China, but in China, you're still in that role. And so you see a lot of money behind these events, all from the big bosses, and they're doing business on the sideline. They may even be doing a little bit of gambling, but we won't talk about that.
Yeah.
But the main thing is they're doing business and
Well,
the process supporting.
It's interesting. It's almost an icebreaker. I mean,
Yeah.
between
Totally.
between two things that you can use. I mean, whatever a sport event is, but martial arts definitely. And if it's closer related to some combat aspect, which is connected to conquering or being conquered, then for some reason it seems to. Once we've gotten that out of the way, we seem to be able to have a better relationship, more cordial relationship with each other. It's the same thing like when a new guy comes into the gym, right? You don't know who he is, and you kind of eye each other out, and you're like, oh, do you want to roll? And you're all like all smiles and whatever, but inside you know what's going on. You're like, okay, I'm going to feel this guy out. He's going to feel me out. I'm going to not let him do what he wants to. This guy's in my hometown, and he's thinking, I'm here. I'm going to kind of prove my... But at the end of it, you're like, okay, that's out of the way. Now we can be friends. You know? So it's really interesting, don't you think?
I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people feel that way. I normally don't, you know. I normally don't. But I know people do feel that way. The other thing, you know, what we forget, you know, we think of martial arts as being this serious thing, life and death combat art, right? But everybody loves a good fight, you know, and it sucks when you see somebody fight and they die, right? So you know,
or gets permanently or seriously injured.
That's no fun. So why not invent a way where you fight and then live to fight another day, and everyone has a good time watching you do it? And I think, you know, humanity has figured that out from a very early stage, that watching fights is fun, and wrestling around the world has been one of those, maybe even the first spectator entertainment sport, you know?
That's the thing that a lot of people don't actually realize. I think, you know, today everybody wants to put ownership on everything. So there's always that talk about first and invented and what, but they don't realize that wrestling is it's a totally human legacy, and it's something that we find all over the world, some form of wrestling. And whether it was even within a community just on its own for entertainment, or even as a way of staying strong, or even as a way of actually developing some sort of a skill that you'll use in battle. But it's just always been there. And you can watch it with kids, though, because they come to this conclusion naturally when they're playing with each other, especially boys for some reason. But they come to this conclusion, they end up semi-wrestling even though they don't know what they're doing actually. I mean, you could have them not exposed to wrestling and have them play, and eventually it gets to something that resembles a bit of wrestling kind of you know, one-upmanship in terms of just the human way of doing things, but it's more bonding than anything else at the end. So
well, exactly, it's funny, you know, my closest friends are all people I've wrestled with, and one of my closest friends literally put me in hospital.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, you know, that's, I don't know, you're right, it's a bonding process, and maybe it's toxic masculinity, but I'm very happy to have that person as one of my closest friends, and there's a kind of respect between us, and a kind of...
But is it toxic? I mean, I don't want to get into these catchphrases.
Well, I mean, no, I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to that. You know, I think it's a life skill. I think there's a lot of joy to be had in exploring your own body and what it's capable of. And there's a lot of joy to be had in movement. And there's a lot of joy to be had in using your body to communicate in a way that is violent. Absolutely, but it's a two-way thing, and it's a connection, and it's a expression, and all of these things are healthy as long as they're in a controlled and safe environment for a greater purpose. It's not violence for the sake of violence, you know. So in that context, I think it's very healthy.
Well, it's not malicious either. So that's why I think it's quite interesting. I mean, why not have that type of competitiveness, whether if it's a human condition, which it probably is, come out or be addressed or somewhat be mitigated in a casual weekly activity, as opposed to letting it build up and then somehow come out in a very nasty, malicious way because it's just been pent up. And
well, today it's coming out online, you know, in the form of YouTube comments, or in the form of social media posts, or in the form of some other weird, distorted expression of aggression that young men in particular need to be able to express in a healthy channeled way. So me personally, I think teachers who teach young people how to channel that aggression and to use it for a positive purpose are really important in the society. And so when I see, for example, my teacher is 86 years old, he's still teaching kids, you know.
You know about Li Baoru.
Li Baoru is 86 years old. He's still teaching kids. And everyone calls him grandpa, and they all listen to him. But, you know, he's doing that because he realizes that these kids can channel that aggression into a positive end, and can use that to create a strong character that benefits the community, you know. And he's been doing it for so long that he does it very, very effectively.
Isn't it interesting, because you've seen it, you've lived here long enough to see the way, especially more recently, where it's become somewhat more, I don't know, focused on, is the stress and the pressure they put on kids at school, and parents are totally this is if listeners don't understand that are not within China how much pressure kids are under here at school. I mean, from not only their parents' expectations, but what is now considered the norm here. I mean, you'll have kids that will come out with like 80-something%, and their parents will be like, that's not good enough. Why aren't you the best one in your class? Or why 90%? Or, you know, why haven't you gotten full marks? And you've got some free time after school. You're not going to do something you enjoy. I'm going to send you in for extra lessons so you can get to that top thing. So, I mean, why I'm saying this is because that builds up a whole lot of negative and pent-up emotion and stress that builds up within this. And Li Baoru is probably right. You know, he's like, okay, give them an avenue to at least get rid of some of that stress and anger, and it'll make them more balanced people, right? So, I mean, that's why the understanding of, okay, in today's day and age where they think this type of competitive martial art thing is just bravado and macho posturing by men. Yeah, but look, you don't understand each person, what stress he's got building up from all other avenues, completely unrelated. It could even be that his home life between his mom and dad, their relationship isn't good, and it's affecting him negatively. Now you've got this little pressure building up, and you've got this little valve, which is a martial arts in whatever form it is, but for intents and purposes of de-stressing something that is something very negative or pent-up resentment, martial arts is a very good way. I mean, you could say any exercises, but I would say that martial arts has that little knack over it because of how you get to express yourself, you know? When you get really angry, you don't, I mean, this is normal humans. You don't think, I'm going to ride a bicycle now. You want to hit something. So, I mean, that's how you get rid of the anger, right? I'm not saying you should go out and hit something. I'm just saying that is just how things want to get expressed.
I mean, there's absolutely that value in having that valve.
Yeah.
And I think what matters even more than having that valve is through the practice of martial arts, you build confidence in yourself, which carries over into every aspect of your life. And there are some kids who are really terrible at school. They still have that pressure to perform really well. And for them, you know, they put on a wrestling jacket and they can throw someone and they can build their confidence that way. So I think that's really important, building confidence and building strength and realizing that they don't need to express violence in everyday life to feel a sense of confidence or self-belief, self-esteem. So I mean, in addition to having that valve, I think it creates stronger human beings, more confident people. In particular, those people maybe who don't typically do well in a scholastic environment, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
Because just like in New Zealand or in South Africa, you know, you've got those kids who are good at school, good at those sort of cognitive tasks, And then you have those kids that have intelligences in other places like music or movement, sport, you know. So I think it's a valuable part of education and really a great gift that China has given the world, really, in martial arts. Wow. Thank you, China, for bringing this to the world, you know. Not that they were the inventors of anything, but a lot of the martial arts you see...
what we
today,
consider as martial arts is a systemized practice or stylistic practice that has carried on irrespective of age.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed untold people's lives, and my life included.
Mine too.
I have ADHD, so I was that kid. Smart, but I couldn't sit still for class. Couldn't do my homework, and I would medicate basically with sport, with movement, and every single sort of movement you can think of, football, soccer, athletics, you name it. That was the only way I could get myself to sit still. And it wasn't until I found martial arts that I found myself really physically and cognitively engaged in learning.
So you felt like you belonged there. You found
that too. But that sense of total physical and cognitive engagement then enabled me to sit down and study later on,
right,
which got me through university and postgrad and all of these other things.
So that's probably exactly that.
Yeah.
You were building up,
Yeah.
things were building up inside you that, I mean, everyone's different, and you didn't have a release for them, and you found that release which helped you to then mitigate that energy that was accumulating in the wrong times, and then use your mental focus on things when they needed to be done at school or other places.
Well, the sad thing about kids here today is that school is such a big pressure that they don't have time to...
They don't have time for anything.
Yeah.
They just get their time filled up. That's why we've got people... I mean, it was 2 months ago that somebody jumped off the building across the street here. Another student jumped off the building and killed herself because she just couldn't handle the pressure, and her parents were just push. And it's very sad. I'm not saying that jiu-jitsu or Chinese wushu or something or Shuai Jiao would have helped her, but that's the reality of society today. And we've got the same thing in adults in the West with the stresses of trying to compete and make a living. And as, you know, I mean, there's just...
Oh, one thing I admire about you is you've really kept that... It's like this practice that you have in your life. And I mean, you're not a spring chicken anymore like myself. And what I endeavored to imagine is, of course, you feel some need to promote and to ensure the survival of your art. But at the same time, it's also like this ballast in your life that keeps you centered and keeps you on track. And it's this rock that you can go back to when things get really turbulent outside.
Well,
I'm the same.
Yeah.
I'm the same. My life is better because of martial arts.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, I feel it. It's been so long. If I don't practice, I start to get edgy.
Yeah.
So in one sense, there is other reasons that I want to maintain and push it forward, like you say, but also it's also something that I've found has centered me in everything that I do. So, you know, I feel lucky that I'm able to do what I'm doing, but we'll see what the future lies for. For me, that's the other issue. I mean, it's about where these things are going in the future too. Although it shouldn't, you know, you might think that somebody might think you're thinking, oh, well, it's got nothing to do with you, because yeah, it's got nothing to do with me in terms of my personal practice. That's true. I can do whatever I want to, but you do wonder what's happening to martial arts and where it's going.
Well, I mean, do you ever feel, maybe it's just me, but do you ever feel like you're now in today's society with MMA that you're not really a martial artist because you don't do MMA?
Not really, because even if I wasn't, if at this age, first of all, if I'm not going to get into MMA, those days are gone. But I think MMA is an important part of martial arts development, especially in the last 20 years until now, because it's kind of given everybody a reality check. And if it hasn't given them a reality check, not to say that everybody needed a reality check, because that's not true either, but if it hasn't given them a reality check, it's also helped to somewhat put everybody on the same page of what when we look at martial arts as a basic defining factor, we're now somewhat back on the same page as a basic underlying factor. MMA has made it that it's impossible for you to go away from that. Because for me, that's the other thing in today's martial arts discussion about, but is it for health? And isn't it not about fighting? And no, it can have all these other benefits. I mean, this is my personal conclusion as I've gone through my life up until. It's got all these benefits. It's got so many benefits, but it has to be based on something, built on a core of something, and that is attack and defense. It's got to have some form of basis upon attacking or defending yourself, whether it be with weapons, without weapons. It's not just the effects. It's not just the health effects, because you can get those from other activities, like we've said. You can get the social aspects, which are, for me, really important too. The social aspects of martial arts are really, really important. That's the other thing that people don't realize. Lonely kids, maybe the martial arts practice is the only socializing they get. Maybe they're not very outgoing kids at school. They don't have a million friends, or they don't have time for it. And the only social aspect they have in their life is the socializing that they get from martial arts. With me, it's been the family that I train with. We're all brothers, and that social aspect of seeing them. It's not like I'm coming to class, let me do my training. Okay, I'm done. Yeah. We're done training. Goodbye. No, you look forward to seeing somebody like you and I were friends. I mean, all of these things, they're side effects, but they're all based on that common underlying thing. So
I'm glad you don't feel that way. I feel that way. I feel there's and I'm a huge MMA fan and have been from the very beginning. But I think it's important people realize that, like you said, the best health benefits, they come, and the best social benefits and all of these things come from the combat element in a martial art. Doing a martial art just for health reasons and not engaging in the combat aspect of an art yields fewer health benefits than doing it for the combat application reason. And obviously you need to scale it depending on the situation you're in at the time, of course, but I think that's really critical, that people they challenge themselves to explore the combat side of their art and master that and train that. So that has huge implications for how you practice your art.
Yeah.
Do you do a form? Do you spar? Okay, you got to do both to a certain degree. Which should you spend more time on?
Yeah.
Do you lift weights? Do you run? Do you skip? Do you hit the heavy bag?
Stretch.
Do you stretch? Do you build those other attributes? And the answer is, if you're focusing on the combat, you need to. More than you need to do a form.
Yeah.
So what I think is, there's this mixed martial arts influence out there where we don't feel we're really martial artists, but we can choose to focus on the combat aspect of our art. And I think that's a really critical thing for people to realize. Don't get enamored with forms or flowery techniques.
Yeah.
And when you stick to that core, that combat core, the health benefits will be so much better. Even if you're an old lady.
Totally.
Even if you're 70, 80 years old.
And I mean, I'm not saying that old people have to go out and spar. They don't have to. However, what they're learning and the way they're executing has to be in line with the logical reason. Well, firstly, that's why we talk about traditional martial arts. I don't like the misunderstanding of traditional martial arts that, you're just doing something because you're counting on some lineage and you're doing things because of some historical. No, we're doing when we say traditional martial arts, it means it's a systemized method that has been handed down in a certain way for specific reasons, and you follow it. If your teacher doesn't understand those specific reasons, I've got news for you. You're not really doing traditional martial arts anymore. You're imitating traditional martial arts. So old people don't have to go out and spar. That's not what I'm saying. But they have to do every technique correctly, which is based on a logical method of attack and defense. That's it. Now, to what level they're going to be and to what physical limitation they have to work within, that's all fine. But we're not going to now say, oh, well, this blocking hand, we don't have to do that anymore. And this hand can be over here because it looks better.
Yeah.
And, you don't even have to align your fist up anymore.
I remember you talking about that with Tai Chi, before, the lower the stance, the more combat oriented it is, and the higher, you don't need to go so low anymore.
Yeah.
I remember in the last podcast you had that conversation, and I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dilution of the original concept. Now, I'm okay with that, as long as it works in combat.
But if you're not testing it in combat.
Exactly. Then there's no reason to change. So I'm all for evolution, as long as it's grounded in combat effectiveness. And I think this is something that, this is going to ruffle a lot of Chinese martial artists' feathers. I think this is something that Jiu-Jitsu has taught us, because they continuously fight.
Yeah.
In a controlled situation, they continuously fight. There's been this explosion of creativity around, there's only so many ways to do an armbar.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of different ways to set it up. And some of them suit different body types. And some of them suit different characters. And I think they've demonstrated, and there's all this argument about, the rubber guard or this guard or that guard. But the reality is that person in that context can use that. And for that reason, it has value for that person, and it has value to be taught to other people who may be able to use in that context.
But those type of evolutions, they are occurring within what I would call a scientific realm. What does that mean? You're testing it. You can have
definitely not scientific, but it's occurring in a combat.
A type of science. A type of science means that you can test something. So that type of evolution I understand. Yeah. The other side of it is those people that are modifying something, they've digested it. They've digested the previous version first. And that's all okay. That's how we get different families, even within my Xing Yi style. Different lines of Xing Yi with slight variations, because people have come to certain ways that work better for them. But in general, we can see that the general concept is there. We understand it. But they've slightly evolved. Now, in more modern times, a lot of the evolution has come purely because of the performance aspect. Now, that's for me is something that...
Well, I've been well down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
The performance side of things.
Yeah, actually, that's what I wanted to ask you. How did you get into Chinese martial arts? I mean, you were saying that you were in New Zealand.
Well, long story short, my martial arts journey began in a library in New Zealand, in Auckland. And it was the best karate book that I came across by Nakayama. I want to say Nakayama. And it was a few volumes, and I got them out, and you could take them out for 2 weeks at a time. And I just kept renewing it and just trying to learn it from a book, right? And
how old were you then?
I don't know, 10.
Okay.
But I was using it on all my friends.
So you were scientifically exploring
something about New Zealand is that most people don't know. We and maybe it's our culture. We love contact sports. We love combat sports, and the Maoris in New Zealand, literally probably the only tribal culture on earth that had war as a sport. Hey, Byron, what are you doing on Saturday? Oh, nothing, Mike. Okay, there's a tribe down the road. Why don't we go and kill them all and steal their women? Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go. Okay. And, so that's the culture that exists in New Zealand. And a lot of people don't know. A tattoo. Why does tattoo exist? And why did the Maori tattoo the face?
Yeah, it was for headhunting and for taking...
Yeah, because people would chop their heads off, right? And that was the only way you could connect the body with the head when you had to take the body back home after a hard war on a Saturday afternoon. So we have this aspect of our culture, and that's why we're good at rugby and we're good at all these other combat sports. But for me, I was reading in this book, and literally the next day in the school ground, I was using it, right? And I got really good. I was doing judo throws, and I was never a bully, but I was always taking care of business, and having a good time doing it. So it wasn't until I was 12 that I finally convinced my mom to let me go to karate.
Okay.
Kempo karate, and that was when I was first exposed to Chinese martial arts. And in the weirdest of ways, we had this cop who was a local cop, tough as nails, man, could do push-ups all day, and after a couple of years with him, I could do push-ups all day. It was fit as a fiddle, and we were learning Kempo karate, and it was really staunch, lots of sparring, lots of self-defense, and a lot of bullshit. A lot of really crappy techniques, but we were all dedicated and engaged, and I was exposed to this technique, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. And he goes, yeah, it's the snake technique. It's from a Chinese style called the hissing eye.
The hissing eye?
Yeah. So later on, I figured out what he was saying. As an adult, it was Xing Yi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because if you use the Wei Jiao's
way of right, Hsing and then I.
Yeah, so he, in his mind, he called it the hissing eye. So it's a snake style, right? So that was my first exposure to Chinese martial arts, man. And
so you started with Xing Yi. I'm proud of you.
Well, it was some bullshit.
No, I know.
Xing
I'm kidding.
You know, some bastardized, watered down form of Xing Yi. That, anyway, I got expelled from that school for excessive force.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and just purely because of...
You mean of the Kempo school, not the academic school?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I was a great student, and thanks to the martial arts, you know. But I was just hardcore, you know, and I left, I got into kickboxing, and I got into another style called Zhao Ga. It's a pre-mantis style, southern style, and that particular school, they were all bouncers and security, and we just fought every single night, lots of sticky hands.
Yeah.
And then I went, like 6 months later, I went back to my Kempo school and beat the adults. I was 16, I think, you know. I beat all the adult black belts in sparring.
Who was teaching Zhao Ga down there?
It was a Maori guy. I don't even know who he learned it from, but he was really good.
Is it Jiao or Chu?
Jow.
And that's the southern mantis.
Yeah, okay.
I know what that is. I mean, I think they also call it Chuga.
I'm not sure. I think in Chinese it's 周家螳螂拳.
In Mandarin, yeah, for sure.
So that was really my first exposure to traditional Chinese. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly that. Yeah. So you know it. Yeah, and they're badass.
They're actually pretty well known, even throughout Hong Kong, and I mean, Hong Kong has got a large proportion, and for some reason now it's becoming quite well known outside of, like in the States. It was quite a big group under a guy called Henry Puyi. He died last year or the year before, and that southern mantis became pretty well known. But yeah, it's also known because it's a hard southern mantis. There's a lot of very close proximity sparring and
and once again back to how you train it, right? So I was training with guys who all had a sense of urgency. Like, we're not just training this for the sake of training. We're training this because we're bouncers. We need to be able to protect ourselves, and we need to be able to do our job. So in that particular context, it was wonderful. And then from there, I found myself really getting a chip on my shoulder, and I felt I was on the edge of not I don't want to say going to jail, but I was one fight away from being the shame of my family. And so I encountered this guy one day in the Oriental markets in Auckland. His name was Han Xiangji. I don't know the characters, Mr. Han. And he was performing the double broadsword, and I was like, whoa, that's cool. Mm-hmm. And then he did a Tai Chi form, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. It was like the 24 step, and I was like, I never saw it before. It's totally awesome. So I'm like maybe 17 at this time, and I was like, okay, I gotta learn it, go and talk to him, dive in there every single day, learning everything he's teaching.
Was he new in New Zealand?
Yeah, he was a New Zealander, new in New Zealand, and he was going through the process of becoming a New Zealander. He was from Beijing, and so I did everything and anything that he was teaching. Qi Gong, you name it. Tai Chi, all the different Kung Fu classes that he had. And
sounds like he came from what we understand now as more of a sport standardized
not at
background.
all.
No?
No, not at all. And it wasn't until I came to China for the first time as an 18-year-old that I realized that. So I was like a year or so into, maybe a year and a half into learning a bit of Chinese, and then also, doing the stuff with Mr. Han. I came to China.
Well, let's go back before you came to China. You were saying that you were training with him every day.
Yeah.
How did you end up coming here? I mean, what led to that? I'm sure your mother was like, what?
I'm just an adventurer. I mean, that's another thing about New Zealand is so small that we all feel motivated to explore the world, and for me, I was like, I love martial arts. I want to go to China. There's bound to be Bruce Lee's on every corner, and
people flying.
People flying, and I'm going to learn all this really cool stuff. So I'm going to China. I was 18, and
so you had trained with this guy for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I rocked up, and I met a few teachers here, but they all weren't who I was looking for. A few Tai Chi teachers.
So I mean, what did you do? You just got on a plane and came here with no plan?
Yeah, pretty much.
So got a visa?
I'd learned a little bit of Chinese before I arrived. I'd learned 我想学武术. I want to learn Kung Fu. I want to learn wushu. And I learned hello and thank you, and I learned how to order a beer,
the key requirement, the bare necessities.
Yeah, and that got me through. And I met this kid who took me to a Tai Chi teacher in Zhuyuan Park, the Purple Bamboo Park, and his name was Shiming.
Yeah, everybody knows Shiming.
Really?
Yeah, you know why everybody...
I have no idea why.
Unfortunately, it's not for positive reasons that everybody knows Shiming.
Okay, well, maybe you can tell me this later, but the first time I saw him, I remember saying to my friend, this is bullshit. And
well, that's basically the reason.
I didn't realize, but apparently he'd been in the US for a while, so he understood some English. And when I said this is bullshit, he understood. And the guy he was pushing hands with literally almost flew into the lake.
Really?
And I was like, okay, that's... And he was doing this thing where he had one finger on somebody's palm, and the other person was, falling on the ground or being thrown.
Well, that's why he's well known, because...
I chased him down after class. I waited for him to get like 200-300 meters away from where I was teaching, and I chased him down. And I put my hand out. I said, "Can you do it on me?" And he goes, "No, can't do it on you." I said, "Why can't you do it on me?" And he goes, "If I do it on you, I'll injure you permanently."
Right.
And I was like, "I don't care." And he was like, "No, but come back tomorrow and train." So I actually went back and fucking almost died.
Really?
Of pneumonia, because like a guy from New Zealand, never seen snow before.
No, so it was winter.
In the winter, training, he put me right down by the lake, right next to the ice, and I was there for less than a month, and I almost had pneumonia.
Yeah, you can't do that on your first trip out.
Yeah, well, I had no idea about the cold, right? So, lesson learned, moved on, and nobody in Beijing...
So he was right. If he does it to you, you'll die.
Well,
pneumonia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was 18, 19, and I had enough intelligence to realize that wasn't really what I was looking for. I did meet a Tai Chi practitioner who I do believe possesses some skill that I've never seen before. It's something hard to explain in New Zealand, actually, later on. But I went around Beijing, and I went to the Beijing team and said, I want to learn wushu and
Shuai.
Yeah, and they're like, no, you're too tall, go away. Literally, that's what they said. You're too tall, go away.
Isn't that interesting though?
I'm 6'4". I was 18, 19, and then, no, fuck off, you're too tall, go away. And I was heartbroken. I was like, that's bullshit. And so one day I was 3 months in China, and I backpacked around places.
But before you tell me about that, in hindsight, I mean, you were probably thinking that there there was some realistic reason to why you were told you were too tall, right? You were probably thinking that martial arts is only for short people, right? But in hindsight, what do you think the reasoning was? I mean, as you understand it now, why do you think they said to you you're too tall? Round two.
No, I think round two. Cheers.
Hang on a second.
I think looking back on it, cheers. I am too tall for competition wushu.
Right, but why?
Why am I too
By the
tall?
way, that beer you're drinking is as strong as wine.
Okay. It's a Trappist beer.
Yeah.
I have to tell you that story too. I mean, I once gave up on life in China and became a Zen monk.
Oh, okay. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Yeah. Let's go chronologically.
No, okay, so why? I don't know. I mean, I think these people in charge of wushu, they've done a lot of research. There a lot of stuff in the sports university, sort of trying to quantify what makes a good athlete.
But an athlete based on what parameters, though?
Well, exactly, based on competition, wushu parameters, etc., etc.
Which are reliant on.
I pretty much didn't fit any of those parameters.
Well, that's the reason is because of the jumping techniques, acrobatic.
I mean, the irony of that is I could jump higher and better than most.
Well, that you're an anomaly then, in generals.
I think
this is the sad part about wushu, and especially what you were told is that you were told that you're too tall. You know what I mean? And that's only because of the parameter of modern sport wushu, which has degree of difficulty jumping. In general, people of a larger size have A, more difficulty jumping, but B, are more prone to injury.
And I would say C also, especially when they're younger, less coordinated, because the bigger your body is, the longer it takes to get to know it. You know, that's why those heavyweights, those big guys in boxing, that's why they're 35, 40 years old. Yeah. And they're just reaching the peak of their boxing career, because in that bigger body, it takes longer to create those neurological connections and coordination that you need to perform at the highest level. So, I mean, I don't blame him for that.
No, well, I mean, you went to a place that is only involved.
I found it heartbreaking.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. That's the sad part.
And I don't want to mention the guy's name. He's fucking famous. And I was like, well, that just broke my heart. But I didn't give up.
Well, it's not his fault too. He's just
he was he was doing this thing. So I don't blame him.
Was he a coach there?
Yeah.
Is he still a coach there?
I don't know. But later on, I'm walking down the road and I'm thinking, shit, my time's running out and I came all this way and I haven't learned anything of value anyway.
So how long had you been here at that point?
Well, I was here for 3 months and I was a month and a half in, and I was like desperate to learn something, because I'd spent all my money I'd saved all year. I'd taken a student loan to come to China and do this. So anyway, I'm walking down Xijumen and I see this big ass stadium, and I think to myself, maybe they have kung fu there, maybe they have wushu there. So I go in the first floor, I knock on the door, and somebody opens the door, and I use my one phrase in Chinese, 我想学武术.
Right.
And they go like this, 三楼, 3楼. And I don't even understand what third floor 3楼 meant, right? And so I go up to the second floor and knock on the door, and 我想学武术, 3楼, 3楼. So I go up to the next floor and I knock on the door and I say, 我想学武术, and they're like, go down the corridor. So I go down the corridor, knock on another door, and Kanga Wu opens the door. Professor Kanga Wu opens the door. And I said,
he looks up at you.
And I was like, 我想学武术. And he was like, come in. He spoke a bit of English. And I was like, all right. That's cool. So I go in, sitting down, big grin on my face, and there's these two guys sitting there, and one of them's Kanga Wu. The other guy is a guy called Chen Shaoyu, who is the inheritor of the Eagle Claw. Really cool guy. Tycoon now. Made billions of property developer now. But he was inheritor of Hebei.
Yingzhao.
I'm not sure if it's Yingzhao Fanzi.
Usually they are. I mean,
it could be, but Ying Jiao was his main style, and later on I connected him with the Ying Jiao Federation in Greece. Actually,
Yeah. So through Lao Fat Mang, which is Lily Lau, and his daughter Lily Lau.
I don't know. It was a bunch of Greek guys.
Yeah, it's Ying Jiao Fanza. It's 100% Ying Jiao, and I know the Greek guy because he also went to the sport
with the glasses.
Yeah.
Well, so he came to the sports university, and I was the guy who connected him with Chen Xiaoyu.
Okay.
And Chen Xiaoyu took him to Hebei, and he stayed in the guy's house, his dad's house, and learned Ying Jiao with him in the actual courtyard. So fantastic experience for him. But Ying Jiao wasn't what I was looking for, and so they.
Did you have some idea what you wanted to learn?
Well, I was like, I want to learn wushu. What sort of wushu? And I'd seen Li Lianjie, and I'd seen the guy I loved. What was his name? The eagle claw guy, Xu Xiaodong.
Xu Xiangdong.
Yeah, Xu Xiaodong. Don't mix those two up.
No.
Yeah.
Opposite ends of a spectrum.
Yeah. And I'd seen, the movie The Shaolin Temple with Yu Hai, who I later on became friends with. And anyway, he goes, come back tomorrow. So I go back tomorrow with my Chinese friend, and I rock up, and there's another guy, third guy there, and he's this yoked young Chinese guy, and I walk in, and he spoke fluent English, man, and I was like, wow, this is great. And he goes, stand up. So I stood up.
Yeah. He said, you're too tall.
And he goes, turn around. So I turned around, and he said to me, you're tall. And I said, yeah. And my heart just fucking sank.
Yeah.
And he goes, this next phrase was, it's perfect for the movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're perfect for the movies. And this guy, he was also a graduate of Beijing. His father was a famous wushu practitioner from Henan. And he was an action director.
Okay.
He had sort of finished his sports career and moved into movies. And I started training with him. And we were training in the Beijing movie studio. So if you can imagine, every day I was turning up, and it was this ancient Chinese street where they fucking filmed.
Where was that?
Where?
Yeah. Do you
On
remember
the
the
north third ring, Jimenqiao, that area. Beijing 电影制片厂. Beijing 电影制片厂. So I was inside there, in the actual old street, going through there, people walking around with all their ancient, they're all kung fu masters, right? Making these great movies. All the Huang Feihong movies were made there. And so every day I'm encountering these people. I know you. I've seen you in that movie. I saw you in that movie. And I would go and train with them there. And I remember the first day I was there training, he goes, okay, Mike, show me what you know. And I was like, I really seriously did this first routine that I was really proud of, and I demonstrated and performed it before many times in New Zealand. And
what was it? Do you remember? Changchen?
I can't remember the name of it, but I'll tell you what happened after I performed it. And I walked over confidently to my coach, Mr. Zhou Yao Jie, and I said, well, there you go. And he goes, okay, so we're going to start from Mabu. And I was like, what do you mean? And I fucking know horse stance. And he goes, actually, I hate to break this to you, but you have been studying Peking opera. Okay. So this guy I'd been learning from in New Zealand was actually Peking opera professional.
Right.
And he'd been teaching me what he'd learned through Peking opera, which wasn't wushu. So like all those techniques. So opera artists, they're really good at xuanzi, at the butterfly kick.
For sure. I mean, that's where sport wushu got it from.
I was brilliant at it. But you don't see opera people doing xuanzi zhuanti. You know, they'll do xuanzi, they'll do 9 of them in a circle. Yeah. Which I could do.
That's a butterfly kick. So
yeah, butterfly kick.
Xuanzi,
sorry. And xuanzi zhuanti is butterfly 360, butterfly twist, right? And even like the whirlwind kick, the 旋风脚.
Tornado kick, yeah.
What do you call it?
Tornado
whirlwind. Right. In the southern hemisphere, we call it a whirlwind.
Depends on where you do the tornado kick.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And which direction, right? In the south, where
You
always
got to do clockwise,
Yeah, exactly.
anti-clockwise in the north.
So the way that Peking opera people do is significantly different to the way wushu person does it, and even down to horse dance and all of these basics are different. So he goes, yeah, by the way, you've been learning opera, and that just fucking shattered my entire world. And it was the first time that I ever felt I was betrayed by a teacher that I put so much faith in.
You know, you're the second person that's told me this, because I have a good friend from Switzerland who started his wushu career with a teacher who had gone there and who had claimed, also from China, told him, wushu master this, teaches all these styles, and then finally it comes out, nah, he's an opera guy.
Well,
and again, he only found this out when he went to subsequent teachers. So, and then he had to start again too, same as you.
Well, I mean, everyone has their pressure to survive, right?
No, so I get that.
People will respond in different ways to that pressure, and I think as a teacher, it's really important to be honest with your students, and it's extremely important as a teacher never to let your students put you on a pedestal, and as a student, never put your teacher on a pedestal. They're human beings. Yeah, they're fallible. They're just like you, and you know, I see it so often in martial arts. The teacher is this amazing person with these amazing techniques, but they're human, and you're also capable of achieving what they've achieved.
Totally, and he should want you to surpass him too.
Yeah. So I mean, I learned a huge lesson from that, and that's sort of shaped my entire approach to martial arts since then. Anyway, I trained with him a month and a half. Fucking loved it. Learned.
So he taught you Jibun Gong from the beginning?
He taught me Jibun Gong.
Basics.
And he taught me the new Changquan routine, which was based on Yuan Wenqing's.
So you learned the first compulsory international Changquan routine?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I went back to... Anyway, before I went back to New Zealand, he said, Mike, don't go. And I was like, I want you to stay here. I've got a movie coming up, and I want you to be in it. And I was like, oh, okay, but I got to go back to university. And he goes, well, just stay for the movie. It's only 3 months. And I was like, but then I'll miss like a
semester.
So I decided to go back to New Zealand. Later on, I found that movie was Fist of Legend with Jet Li.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So, shit, right?
That would have stayed.
Yeah, so...
But who knows, you know?
No, I don't regret, making that decision. I'm very happy with my decision, but it would have been a whole different life.
Right.
And so this guy, for me, even to this day, is a close friend of mine, and I sort of look at him as one of those people you encounter in life who really puts you on the right track. And he's done it multiple times throughout my life. So I'm very blessed to have met him. And it was through Kang Wu and Chen Xiaoyu.
Wow. And did you know who Kang Wu was at any point in that?
I had no idea until later on when I got his book. I got this really thick encyclopedia that he wrote. And I was like, you wrote this? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, that's incredible. And that became like my Bible that I took back, and I was really treasured it. You got it here?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got it in New Zealand somewhere. But I really treasured that, and I'd like to one day meet him again and just thank him. Later on, actually, last year, I met another guy who was a classmate with Chen Xiaoyu. Chen Xiaoyu, the Eagle Claw guy, was a bodyguard for... He was trained as a bodyguard. And I actually met, in a professional context, one of his classmates from the police university where he graduated. And I was like, man, I can't believe what a small world it is. And I met him in Yunnan. And then later on, through him, I got back in touch with Chen Xiaoyu. And I invited Chen Xiaoyu out for dinner and just said, look, I just want to thank you for making that introduction and changing my life, Went back to New Zealand, quit Peking Opera, was extremely upset, but lucked out, and I found a lady by the name of Zhong Sui Lan, Lucy Chen, who was from the Guangdong provincial team.
Okay. And
she was teammates with the guy who had nose cancer, the Nanquan Wang. Qiu, I forget his name, Qiu something.
Tongue cancer.
Tongue cancer.
Yeah. The old Nanquan Wang.
Qiu.
Not Chiu. I can't remember. Forgot. I mean, this name should be on the tip of my tongue. But
But you know the guy I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
He was incredible.
Yeah.
He was incredible. So she was teammates with him, and so I lucked out.
Do you know who her teacher was?
I don't. I have no idea.
Must have been Chen Changmian, because they all had the same teacher. And
Okay.
Chen Changmian was the guy who was in charge of compiling the first compulsory Nanquan routine.
Yeah.
But he himself
Wasn't Zhureqi?
Jureichi was involved, but no. It was Chen Changmian's an old generation. He's like 90 now.
Yeah.
And he's still around, I heard last. I actually studied with him in 2002. I went to visit him. He's already retired at that point. But he himself was a pure Choi Lai Foot inheritor that just made the transition into when it became a sport of wushu. And so all of these really big names of the original Nanquan Wangs, they all have a connection to him. Either they're his direct students or students of his students. Even to today, some of the best guys that come out of Guangdong are students of his students.
I regret not spending more time with Nanquan, in particular traditional styles, Halifo, Choi Lai Fat. I know I've met a few really good fighters from Choi Lai Fat, like Honggia, like
for
serious fighters. So I regret kind of not spending more time there. I also do know that quite a few of them had hip replacements, so that low horse stance and all that kneeling and stuff that they do over time does take its toll on your...
Well, I'm sure this is what people don't get. It's martial arts, and if you're going to actually be using it every day, you're going to get some injuries.
Yeah.
So that's what's going to happen, especially if you're competing in a combative field. For sure, you're going to injure yourself. So it happens, you know. And I mean, even for me, like I've had lots of injuries over my time, both in doing sport wushu and in doing combat stuff. But it was worth every injury.
I'm talking about repetitive, low stance training over decades.
But what I mean to say is that even that low stance training has a function, whether it be to develop your root or to develop leg strength that can later be applied. It's not just going to be all peaches and cream. It's not going to just be, it's only good for you. No, you know.
Well, I mean, I think anyone and everybody would say, if I want to build leg strength, you know, heavy back squats, heavy low bar back squats are the best way to do it, or you know. But you know
this is functional leg strength with application. It's different.
And what we know now about sports science and what we know
back
is
then
extremely different.
Right.
So anyway, I met Zhong Sui Lan. She once again rocked my world, a whole nother level. Like she was a national level competitor in the Guangdong team, and later on I trained with a guy out of Shanghai called Chen Jiajun, who was a Sanda guy.
Also in New Zealand?
Yeah.
What are all these people going to New Zealand? Like, I'm going to go down to the bottom of the world.
Man, I'm telling you, we had some of the best Chinese martial artists in the world in New Zealand. So Chen Jiajun is a Sanda guy from Beijing, classmates with Shuai Jiao.
Okay.
Same class as Shuai Jiao. And he was like, I won't tell you what he said about Shuai Jiao. But anyway.
You can say whatever you want here.
So Chen Jiajun, that was the Sanda side of things. And that for me was like, oh, God, I loved it. And he, to this day, is the best coach I've ever encountered. And my job today, I'm also a coach, but in a professional corporate context. And he is still a role model for me in the respect that he can teach you the same thing every single day in a different way. So you're learning the same basics every single day, and every single day you feel it's different and interesting and engaging and stimulating. And that is like...
And he taught you Sanda?
Yeah, Sanda and also some other, Changquan, Nanquan, all that wushu stuff. So from there, I got to know his classmate, also a classmate of Shuai Jiao. Her name was Shimei Lin, and she was an inheritor of the Wu style, the Kou Tian Wu.
Right.
So the Wu style from Wu Jian Quan down through Wu Yinghua down to her, and she was an inheritor of the Wu style.
Also in New Zealand.
In New Zealand, dude. In New Zealand. So I would train with an inheritor of the Wu style in New Zealand. And she was also, she went with Li Lianjie to meet Nixon in the US. So she was a nationally, number one in Tai Chi for the whole of China, in competitive Tai Chi.
At that time, yeah.
Yeah, and she was also an inheritor of the traditional Wu style. And so I would go down and train with her. And she's the one who I said to you, there's something going on there in terms of all that we hear about Tai Chi being this amazing art. I haven't seen anyone who can back it up. But she's like 5'4" or 5'5".
Yeah.
And there's something going on there. Now, later on, I came to think differently about maybe the influences behind her style, and started connecting things through to Shuai Jiao, because there's a lot of stuff in common there. And anyways, learn with her, and another game-changing experience for me, and really.
And so, in this whole time, you were staying in New Zealand.
Yeah, well, I was. Between trips to China, was still at university.
Yeah, okay.
So I literally did every ounce of time outside of university. I did the bare amount to graduate, and every other hour of my time was spent doing martial arts. And the only reason I graduated basically was because I used martial arts to sort of ground me, to help me study. I used breathing techniques to help me focus. So, wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, all these hacks that we talk about these days, I was doing them in 93 and 94,
It's so funny how all of these, like you said, these hacks and things that people are talking about, this to help you do that. I've been doing martial arts for most of my life, so for me it's like, what are you talking about? I can't even connect it,
Like breathing techniques to just center you. And
yeah, but I've always done that.
So. I know, yeah, but I mean... yeah, and today we're rediscovering maybe some of these things, including myself, and so it was Shimei Lin and Chen Yachun that connected me to Shuai Jun Beiti.
Okay.
And that was later on, that was 96. But before then, I actually came back here and went to Beiti. I didn't stay in Beiti, but every day I trained in Beiti, and I didn't train with a team.
So Beiti is Beijing Sports or Physical...
At the time it was called Beijing...
University of Physical Education.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what it used to be called. Now it's called BUPE. Now it's called Beijing Sports University.
Yeah, when I first went there, it was Beijing Institute of Physical Education.
Okay.
Beijing 体育学院.
Right.
Not 体育大学.
Right.
So I studied... I couldn't learn with an expensive teacher because I didn't have the money as a student, right? So
who were the head teachers there at that time?
Men Huifeng.
Okay.
Zhu Ruiqi.
So it was them. Shuai Jun, Men Huifeng, Zhu Ruiqi.
Yeah, I got a great Men Huifeng story.
We'll get to it.
But so I went there and I was training with a kid on the school team, and his name was Yu Tao. And I was in love with the praying mantis because of my previous experience with it. Because on Shaolin Temple, the movie, right? Praying mantis is in there.
Yeah, the abbot in the movie is a mantis guy.
Not the abbot, the master, the shifu.
Wasn't he the abbot in the...
No, he wasn't.
Oh, okay.
The abbot was somebody else, I don't know. But he was the shifu who saved me in India. So anyway, I'm like, want to learn praying mantis. I'll go and talk to this kid. So I talked to Yu Tao. And I didn't know at the time. He goes, yeah. So I make an agreement. I'm going to come every day and train with you. And you're going to teach me mantis. Yeah, no worries. That was Yu Hai, the guy from Shaolin Temple, the master, the shifu in Shaolin, his son. Yeah. So Yu Hai means ocean.
Right.
Yu, his surname, Hai means ocean. And he had twins. And twin boys. And they're both kick-ass martial artists, right? And he named his twins Yu Bo and Yu Tao, And bo tao in Chinese means wave.
Right.
Yeah, so his twins are like waves on the ocean. So I thought it was beautiful. Anyway, I learned mantis, the competition mantis form with Yu Tao, and through that made a connection with Yu Hai.
Yeah, well, Yu Hai made that routine.
Yeah, and made that connection with Yu Hai, and later on through my involvement with MMA and kickboxing, I got to know Yu Hai quite well.
Okay.
Which was a dream come true for me, you know. And so then after that, I went back to New Zealand and kept practicing mantis, kept doing that sort of thing. And then after graduating, decided to come back and live in the sports university. In my
Did you formally enroll or just?
Yeah, I was formally enrolled.
Okay.
So.
And that was what year?
96. Yeah, but my initial thinking was to go to Taiwan. But
okay. Why Taiwan?
Well, Taiwan has a cultural university outside of Taipei.
Yeah, I've been to it.
Yeah, Yao Honggang.
Yeah,
Taiwan Wenhua Daxue.
It's up on the hill.
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
been to it many times.
Yeah, so my teacher Shimei Lin was a wushu coach there for
Okay.
a year or two, you know, and she said it's great, go there, you'll love Taiwan. I'd been there before.
So she was a teacher there?
Yeah.
Do you know when she was a teacher there?
Maybe 93, 94.
Do you know what did she have any connection?
Tai Chi and wushu.
Yeah, but what was she was teaching
In the
standardized wushu or traditional wushu?
I think she was teaching both, yeah.
Because it's really interesting. There's a very strong connection in that university to a system which is very popular in Taiwan called Changhong. And it's a combination of what they consider Changquan and Hongjiaquan.
Uh-huh.
And it came from one teacher who learned both, and he taught both systems, and he was a teacher there. And he passed away a few years ago of a sudden heart attack. But a lot of people that came out of that university learned the Changhong system. And I kind of looked into the Chang part, because the Hong is pretty clear. We know what Honggang is. I was like, what Chang? Because Chang is just a collective term. What was? Yeah. And it was connected to Han Qingtan. Han Qingtan was one of the Nanjing Guoshu Institute graduates.
What, Meihua Zhuang or what?
Exactly. It's Meihua. He did Meihua. So it's Meihua with other things, Tan Tui, etc. You know, the usual that you learn. I mean, I even learned Tan Tui when I was learning some of the classical northern stuff from traditional people. They were teaching you Tan Tui as a form of basics. So it's very interesting. So I'm wondering if this lady might have also learned some of that system.
I'm sure she would have tried to learn. She was an insatiable learner, you know, even with all her knowledge and all her experience and all her accolades, she was still, that's what I admired about her. She's very open to learning, and she was a martial artist like us, you know. So no, that wasn't her.
But you wanted to go to this place because of her.
Yeah. Well, the connection, right? The connection. So what happened was Taiwan was going through some election cycle, and they wanted independence. Jiang Zemin, the chairman of China, decided to test missiles off the coast of Taiwan. We don't want independence. Okay, the missile testing stopped, but I ended up changing my ticket from Taipei to Beijing, and I was like, okay, that's the safe option.
Right.
And so I rocked up at the Beijing Sports Institute again.
Yeah.
And my goal in turning up there was, that was 96, and the World Wushu Champs were in Italy in 97. I think it was November 97. So I was like, okay, I'm here. I got a year. I'm going to go for the New Zealand team and compete in Italy, which is what I did.
Did you have a federation then?
Yeah.
Who was the head?
The chairman was a guy called Peter Yu, a Wing Chun guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the first guy that I kind of came into my radar from New Zealand
there's another guy, Glenn Keith. Yeah, Glenn Keith.
But Glenn Keith is still involved. But before even this, the first person that came into my radar from New Zealand was a guy called Orlando Garcia.
Yeah, I know that. He's from the Sport University.
He's also from the Sports University.
His wife was a Kiwi, Lucy somebody or other. Mm-hmm. And she went back to New Zealand with him, and he was running the New Zealand team for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you never had any connection with him?
No. I was well gone by the time he even arrived in New Zealand.
Okay.
And honestly, I mean, like I guess anywhere, Chinese martial arts is political.
Yeah, always.
And the people running it are not always the people who are the most respected or have the most accolades or the most credibility.
Or even wushu people half the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so we know this very well. And the people with the most ability in that space were not the people who were running that organization,
Right.
but they were the gatekeepers for me competing. And so I came, trained my ass off, got accepted into the New Zealand team, and I was stoked about that. For Changquan and the long fist, the spear and sword, and my passion was really the sword.
Right.
I love the spear as well.
Jian, as in the straight sword.
Yeah, straight sword.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, got accepted into the New Zealand team, and then I came across this real turning point in my life. I am going to Italy to compete, represent New Zealand.
In Rome.
In Rome, yeah. And my mum was super excited. Oh, I've never been to Italy. I'm really excited. I'm going to come and watch you compete. My grandma, my auntie, they were all like, we want to come watch you compete. So
No pressure.
no pressure, but like, okay, well, going to Italy is really expensive, and I think
Yeah.
it's going to be my mum who needs to pay for that.
Yeah.
And I
You still got some beer there?
yeah, I do.
Okay.
And I also realized that my mum was helping me out every now and then when I was starving at university. And I thought, well, shit, if I go and compete, then literally I'm competing and going back to New Zealand. But after a year in China, I feel like I've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I've only just started to make some progress with my Chinese. I've only just started to figure things out, and I don't want to leave. So I decided to pull out and to use the money that I would have spent competing to stay for another year in China.
It's probably a good call.
Well, I don't know. It changed my life.
No, totally, it's a good call.
It changed my life, and to a certain degree, I think I've never been as focused since on achieving a goal as I was focused on that goal.
Getting to Rome.
Getting selected,
Right.
yeah. And then giving it up after that for me was really hard decision, but I mean, it changed the course of my life.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
regret it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you stayed?
I stayed, and I stayed at the sports university, and of course lots of crazy fun things happened there, lots of experiences, met lots of people, went lots of places, went lots of competitions, and had a good time, and met a lot of people, a lot of girls, a lot of trouble along the way, a lot of alcohol, a lot of crazy experiences along the way. And
Sorry, the cat has decided to make an appearance and inspect
well, it was a kiss.
what we're
I got a
talking
kiss.
about.
I got a kiss. So, yeah. So from there, I decided, okay, well, I'm here and I want to expand what I'm learning, and this is where I started really exploring the traditional side of things.
Okay.
And it started with me every weekend. I would go to Temple of Heaven
Yeah.
early on a Saturday and Sunday morning and just explore. And I would encounter all of these people doing all sorts of different things, and all of them I found interesting, including the opera. And I would sit there for hours just listening to opera after training, you know. And you know, you meet these old guys in the dead of winter with their shirts off doing that iron shirt conditioning. And you meet all different kung fu styles, but they're all kind of in the community. They're not really professional.
Well, I mean, I don't know what we can classify as professional, you know?
Well, they're amateur people with jobs. I mean,
But that's what martial arts was.
it was,
Yeah.
unless it was your job to be a
Unless you were a bodyguard or a caravan escort, but that's a minority.
Yeah.
The people that were practicing still had daily lives to live.
Yeah.
You know?
Later on with Chet, I took Chet down there once, and I was like, let's go and see Old Man Lee in the park one morning, because Old Man Lee works out there every morning, even now.
Yeah.
86 years old, he's still throwing people around in the morning in the park. Anyway, go down there with Chet, and we meet Zhao Dayuan, who I think is
my uncle.
Your uncle, a Bagua practitioner who's really good at Qinna, at joint manipulation and grappling.
Yeah.
So we meet Zhao Dayuan, we meet Li Baoru down there, and there's this old Taiji guy with a bun, white hair, long beard, and a bun.
I know him too.
You know him too?
Yeah.
He's just hanging around there, and Li Baoru says, "Oh yeah, here's this guy. He's from the Ming Dynasty." so I laughed my ass off. I was like, "Here's this Li Baoru, this wrestler who's arguably." Him and Zhao Dayuan, the only two guys who are for real in Tiantan Park. He's introducing this Taiji guy as being from the Ming Dynasty.
And he could speak like this because no one could fuck with him. That's why.
Well, that's true. But it was also Li Baoru and I think the connection we had was we both have the same sense of humor. And he's a really open-minded old Chinese guy, and he loves to laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we connected, you know.
He comes to almost every single one of my Bagua family gatherings. So every time there's been some big event, whether it's been somebody's students getting students, like a Baishe ceremony. Li Baoru is always there.
Well, I mean, he's well respected, and one reason is that he's very respectful of other people as well. And I think everyone acknowledges the sacrifices and the commitment he's made to Shuai Jiao and to martial arts in general.
And to Sanda.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of the key people that they.
Him and Min Huizhi were like the two main people behind Sanda, and arguably, I know I'll piss people off by saying this, the best part of Sanda is the wrestling.
Exactly.
So anyway, I lost where I was.
Oh, you were saying that you remained in China, and that's when you started delving into traditional. So you went to Tiantan.
And then I was like, okay, this is great, love it. Learned a bunch of stuff, learned Cha Chuan from some old guy.
By the way, the reason why you lost where you are is because of that 12% or 11% Trappist beer that you drink.
Well, Trappist monks, man. Yeah. You know, in China you have monks that drink alcohol as well. And I have a tattoo by a guy called Huai Su, a Buddhist monk from the Tang Dynasty. And he was known for being drunk all the time, writing the most amazing poems, and being a womanizer. And so I got a tattoo on my arm of the character for consciousness, Shen.
Right.
And there's one stroke through the middle of that. It looks like a sword. So I got that tattoo because I practice a sword. I identify with being incessantly drunk, but also spiritual and also creative, and also I love the opposite sex quite well. I think
pretty normal.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the connection there. Monks.
There's actually a Japanese monk that is got the same thing, and he also wrote poetry. I forgot what his name was. I think his name was Ikkyu something or other.
Also a martial artist?
No, he was just a Zen monk.
Yeah.
Who was a womanizer and an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And he would write some profound things.
So was he a womanizer first or an alcoholic first?
I don't know. It's like the chicken and the egg, right?
I think the womanizing comes first, and your alcohol is the way to deal with it.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
Yes. So anyway, learned a bunch of stuff there, and everyone there was really happy to teach me because I had my basics down, and they could literally show something to me, and I could do it better than they could.
Yeah.
And so I became this monkey that, like, look at the white guy, look how good he is, you know, come and look at my student. And I was just there learning as much as I could. And I also first got exposed to Yi Quan.
Okay.
At that point, I went with another student and a Japanese kid and we went to meet the Yao brothers. Yao Zhongxun's two brothers.
Two sons.
Yao Chengrong and Yao Chengguang.
Yeah.
And so this guy had learned Yi Quan in Japan and went there and
probably from Kenichi, so
Taiki Ken.
Which is Da Cheng Quan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Da Qi Quan.
No, Da Cheng Quan. They literally pronounce it like
but
that.
I think the characters is Qi.
They
Da
use
Qi
Qi?
Quan. Yeah, I think so.
In Japan, that's a bit weird.
They change it a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my first meeting, I don't know which of the twins it was, whether it was Rong or Guang. Basically, he touched hands with the guy. He pulled him forward.
And punched him in the face.
Head-butted him.
Oh.
Kneed the shit out of him. And then pushed him back onto a seat. That was my Japanese friend. Like, right in front of me. And I was like, that's not cool. That's very uncool. You know? This guy didn't come to challenge or do anything like that, you know. But anyway, that was my first exposure to Yi Quan. And later on, I learned that it was called the gangsters.
Liu Man Quan.
Liu Man Quan, right? And I was like,
Hoodlum style.
That doesn't surprise me at all. And I went later on with another Japanese guy who was learning with the Yao brothers, Shisong, very good wushu guy. He also learned with Chen Shaoyu. He had a pet monkey in the sports university and used to take a shower with him, and he would wash his hair and at the same time wash the monkey's hair that was sitting on his shoulder. Benzo will tell you the story as well. This monkey, he was like one of the family, you know, for us. And
yeah, you can try to do that now. They won't let you get into the university with that. But China was a different place.
Definitely not. So Shisong used to learn Yi Quan as well. He was very serious, and you could see him practicing Zhan Zhuang every day outside. And that was my exposure to Yi Quan. And I used to run a lot. I still run a lot. And I would run up from... It was a long way, dude. I was fit. I would run up from the university, run to the Fragrant Hills. So that alone is like 10K. It's going to be more. And then I would run to the top of the hill and then back down and back again. And I would do it for fun. And I would do it in the morning. And there was one day I went up and I came to this old space that used to be a temple but had been destroyed completely. So it was just this flat area and sort of tiered in a valley. And I got there and I was like, whoa, I felt something. And I said to my friend, I was like, somebody's practicing here. Somebody really fucking good is practicing here. And then we kept running and we went back. And I went back and I couldn't get it out of my mind. So I think it was the next weekend on a Sunday. I went up early and I ran to that space and I said, I'm just going to hang out here and see if anyone turns up. And this guy turned up. And I was like, oh, okay, what's going on? What are you doing? And he was doing push hands. And so I was like sort of hanging around, observing in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, right? And he's doing push hands with this lady. And I just like went and talked to him and said, hi, I'm Michael. What are you doing?
Did he say first base? Because
and he was like, oh, okay, your Chinese is good. That's the first response, you know. And we got talking, and he goes, yeah, this is what I'm doing, what I practice is called Yi Quan. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm curious. Can you teach me? And he was like, well, come back tomorrow. And I went back tomorrow, and he taught me, started teaching me.
Okay.
And I just kept fucking going back. They couldn't get rid of me, you know. And I went.
So what
back.
did you start with?
Yeah, Zhan Zhuang. Yeah. Not that. That's Jiji Zhuang. That's combat.
What did you start with? Which Zhuang?
Hunyuan Zhuang.
Hunyuan, just Hunyuan.
Yeah. And so that was the beginning of a 5-year odyssey into Yi Quan. And
who was this?
It was a guy called Liu Qiuming.
And who was his teacher?
He was a student of Yao Zhongxun's. His teacher was a student of Yao Zhongxun's. I can't remember his teacher's name.
So you know, my teacher's teacher and Yao Zhongxun were blood brothers.
I'm not surprised.
I mean, that's why I mean, Yi Quan, Xing Yi. I mean, and also in that part of they lived in the same neighborhood. So.
Liu Qingming lived in Huajiadi, where Wang Jing is now. That
Okay.
area.
Yeah.
And now I think he lives way out. I learned with him for 5 years, and I was at least 2 hours a day of training Yi Quan.
Yeah, it's got to be at least 2 hours.
At least, some days it'd just be Zhanzhong for 2 hours,
Yeah.
and so I have some thinking about that. And at the same time, I also
So I mean, we said Zhanzhong a couple of times. If people don't know, that's post-standing or standing practice, which is a set posture that you hold, and there's certain instructions or guidelines or mental directions and things, and physical as well. But you generally are in a stationary position.
and it comes from Xing Yi Quan.
Yeah.
In Xing Yi Quan, they hold San Ti Shi, which is I guess you call it the Trinity posture.
Yeah.
And so Zhanzhong, the term Zhanzhong wasn't a Xing Yi term. It was a Yi Quan term, and it wasn't Wang Xiangzhai who was Guo Yuansheng's nephew, I think.
So there's some
Some blood relative, anyway. It wasn't him that created the term Zhanzhong. It was somebody who wrote about what he was practicing. It might have been what's the guy? Wu, one of the first Taiji guys. Wu,
Which Wu?
Wushu Wu. Yu Tang.
Yeah, I mean,
Wu
this,
Yutang?
yeah.
It might have been him who first described that as being Zhanzhong, and then that name stuck. But the practice itself comes from Xing Yi, and the inventor of Yi Quan, he felt that was key to
The essence.
The essence. That was the key to increasing your combat effectiveness. And so he decided to emphasize that as opposed to the forms, which, this is according to their history, that was the reason why they decided to drop the Xing from Xing Yi Quan, and just focus on that internal, mental, cognitive aspect.
But you know what's also interesting about Xing Yi?
Yeah.
A lot of the older generations refer to the 5 elements, which are Pi, Zuan, Beng, Pao, Heng, those that we do in lines, which is the first things you learn after you learn how to stand and step. They still call those Yi Quan.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because the 5 elements are not necessarily moves. They're 5 vectors, 5 energies, 5 ways to develop this directional force with your body and the mechanics that go with it. And then you learn the 12 animals, which is those energies applied in different shapes and tactics and in different ways. So they call those Yi because that's the intention behind the movements. And then the 12 animals would be Xing Quan because they're set tactics and set shapes and set things. So it's quite interesting, but and I've heard that that's way older. Also, this idea of calling those Yi Quan. So,
well, I mean, the other thing also, I mean, you can talk about this, and I'm sure you'll have your perspective. The whole concept of forms is a relatively new concept.
oh yeah, for sure.
Traditionally, it had been more about individual techniques.
That would be
gong
Shu, yeah, and Gong, yeah.
right? Your, those fundamentals that you practice over and over and over in a repetitive manner. And that's why in Chinese and in wrestling we say this. We say, and Bruce Lee said it. He stole it. He didn't invent the saying, the saying that don't be afraid of the guy who knows 1,000 different techniques.
Yeah.
Be afraid of the guy who's practiced one technique 1,000 times.
Right.
That's not Bruce Lee. That's actually...
that's the essence of Chinese martial arts. The older ways.
Yeah. And so I think those forms are a relatively new thing. And so me encountering Yi Quan was also a kind of turning point, because at that point in time, I knew so many fucking forms, dude, that I decided, okay, enough is enough. I need to focus on the gong, on the essence, on the inside, on that, those fundamentals.
Yeah.
And so I started developing an allergy to learning new routines, seriously, like a nauseous psychological reaction to routines.
And that's what people today think is learning martial arts, learning forms.
Well, it's not. It's
And
not. It's
not.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
So anyway, I started learning with this guy, and also Bai Ta Wei Shi. That's the only time I've ever gone through that. Yeah,
Okay.
gone through that.
So by Tai, you formally became his disciple.
Disciple, yeah. And over time, what I realized was this is also not what I'm looking at. It's also removed from reality in terms of combat.
Well, it's half of it. I mean, if you took that and started applying it or testing it or sparring
it doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work. And it wasn't until I went to the Yi Quan, that it was Wang Xiangzhai's birthday or something. We went to this huge conference. All these Yi Quan guys turned up. And there's a guy from Tsinghua University sitting on the stage saying, oh, well, I can, when I walk down the road, I can actually feel the kind of power expression under my feet and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting there thinking, I made a mistake. I'm in the wrong fucking room. Because I'm a martial artist. I'm not a person who talks about theory.
Right.
I'm not a person who gives a shit about the philosophy. I mean, I do. But the only way to understand it is to fight. To be at that combat orientation. Anything else is just pontification. It's just academia.
Especially when in today's day and age, when it goes even worse, they're not only testing, but they're not even training really. Yeah. They're simply talking about things.
Exactly. Yeah, and intellectualizing.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, hang on, why isn't anyone talking about when they fought a Thai fighter or when they fought a wrestler, or why are we talking about some dude walking down the street? And I was like, okay, it has to stop. So I stopped, and there was that, and then there was a competition in that same conference, push hand competition, and I saw the push hand competition, and I was like, man, should I be in this competition? And I was like, okay, I'll watch it. I've never seen one before. I'll watch it, and I watched it, and it was like, I just wasted 5 years of my life learning this art for this? You got to be kidding me. And so it was a real kick in the balls. And later on, that was how I made the connection with Li Baoru. When I went to meet him with Chet, I just went as a translator. And so Chet's like, oh, it's a great honor to meet you, Master Li. We know all about you in America. And Master Li was like, okay, welcome, I'm really happy that you're a Shuai Jiao guy, and all the formalities, and then he looks at me. And I mean, just Master Li looks at me and he goes, so what's your story? And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, you're a martial artist too, right? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, so what's your story? And I told him my story, and I told him about Yi Quan. And he goes, what do you think of Yi Quan? And this was another turning point in my life. I remember it so vividly. What do you think of Yi Quan? And he goes, I learned Yi Quan. What do you think of Yi Quan? And his teacher, Bu Enfu, Wang Xiangzhai, claimed to have taught Bu Enfu. Bu Enfu was a boxing champion of China and a wrestling champion of China. Could have kicked his ass. And Wang Xiangzhai was already an old guy at that time, and they were just... So on the surface,
it was more about that age respect thing.
It's kind of like Steven Seagal taught Anderson Silva, that sort of thing. Right. I showed him a technique or two, and I taught him that if you move your pinky this way, you'll be more effective. Okay. Right. I'm imagining that, but that was kind of the relationship, because Bu Enfu was already badass when he met Wang Xiangzhai, and so Li Baoru was like, I know Yi Quan. What do you think of it? And I'm thinking, my mind's racing. Okay,
what's the right answer?
Do I tell him the politically correct answer, or do I tell him what I really think? And I remember my mind saying, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to say what I think.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Yi Quan is only good, might only be good, if you already know how to fight.
Which is the case with Wang Xiangzhai to a degree.
And Yao Zhenxun.
Yeah.
Yao Zhenxun was a huge Tan Tui guy before that. And already accomplished street fighter before he even started learning. And he started learning boxing as well. So, and I said to him, look, it's only good if you know how to fight already. And if you don't, it's a complete waste of time. And he smiled and he laughed and he goes, "You got to come and learn with me."
Okay.
And there was a connection there. It was like this moment where he communicated to me, "You're honest. I'm honest. You told me what you really think, and I like that."
You know, I'll tell you an interesting, similar kind of situation I was in with my teacher way back in the beginning. I'd probably been training with him for about 3 years, and one day we were training, and this guy showed up just out of the blue, and he was like talking to my teacher, and then he decided to say to my teacher, "Hey, can I test out your student? Can I play with your student a little bit?" And my teacher said, "Yeah, sure, go, whatever you want." And this guy came and he had some parameters, you know. We don't have parameters. That's the other funny thing about push hands. Xing Yi has no push hands. It's not a pushing art. That's the thing. We don't have parameters. You're either striking and hitting each other or you're not, you know. And okay, fine. He said he had these parameters, and I was trying to be polite. So I didn't overtly go out of my way to destroy the guy. But at a certain point, he was trying to do that to me. So I just merely defended myself, but I didn't counter. And he kind of knew what was up, and he just looked at my teacher, said he's not bad, and then he left. And then we finished training that morning, and I went to my teacher's home for lunch. And while we were eating, he was really quiet. It was really, really quiet. And while we were eating, and you know, he poured me some baijiu. And no, sorry, I mean we had baijiu together. So he's like. And then he sat down, and out of the blue, while we were eating, he looks at me and says, "Byron, what do you think I want you to do when somebody comes and tests you out like that?" And I'm sitting here thinking, what is the most auspicious answer, you know, the most humble? What does he want me to say? You know, because I don't really know, but what is he asking me? And is it a trick question? How do I answer this? And I'm like, you want me to be very respectful of the guy, and I mustn't like injure the guy. And he says, "No." He says no, like in English, just like that. And then he tells me
the one English word he knows.
Then he tells me in Chinese, he's like, "I want you to completely destroy the guy."
But did he say that, or did he say "fuck him up"?
Yeah, basically that's what he said. He said, "I want you to basically that." Okay. And then he said, "I will admonish you in front of the guy, but in my heart, I will be very happy." So I was like, all right, I get how this works now. And that's basically what I did. Anytime anybody else came up with that kind of I think, because he explained to me, he said, they're going to try do that to you.
Yeah.
They're not going to hold back.
Yeah.
No matter what they say.
Yeah.
And they're going to exaggerate. He said, this guy's going to go back and say, "I played with Di Guoyong's student, and look at me, I'm fine." You know, so... I mean, it's a different world.
Yeah, and I mean, I learned a lot of lessons like that as well. And I remember one lesson I learned. You know, I had the same upbringing, right? Be respectful, you know. And somebody started talking. I was at another Yi Quan school. Somebody started talking shit about my teacher. One of the students of that teacher at that school. And I was like, I was lost. What should I do? You know, I'm a visitor here. And I went back and I talked to my teacher and I said, well, you know, what should I have done in that context? What's the right behavior? And he said, you should have put him in his place. And I was like, but is that the right thing to do? And he goes, yeah, you don't let people get away with talking shit about your teacher. And you know, I think... that for me, because I was raised by women, that for me was a lesson in being a man. Somebody is insulting the person who's closest to you, or one person who's invested so much in giving you what you have. You don't let them get away with it. And he's talking about how his teacher is better. My teacher said, next time, just ask him, "I don't give a shit about your teacher. How fucking good are you? Come over here right now." And that's what I appreciate about wrestling. And wrestlers, they don't talk shit like that because they know that there's a mat, and
at any point in time you'll be called on.
No, not any point in time, but yeah, you got to back your shit up.
Yeah,
you don't just talk, and I think that's a problem with a lot of martial arts today. There is a lot of talk, and that's one reason why Li Baoru's attitude resonated with me. And you told a story about meeting this guy and having your teacher say, "I want you to kick his ass." And I've encountered that so many times in China. I've encountered it in Jiu-Jitsu. And yeah, it's a real pressure, and you have to sort of decide how you're going to deal with that. I also struggled with the difficulty here in China. In the early days, there was a lot of violence on the street. And I felt that it was always my duty as a martial artist to stop violence. And so I would continue, like literally every week, I would be involved in some sort of altercation, stopping a fight. I stopped fights in supermarkets. I stopped a fight in Jeans West once between two women. I remember coming up an escalator one day, and there was two women whacking each other with their handbags, and about 50 people in a circle around watching.
Yeah.
And I just came up to the top of the escalator and stopped the fight, and then bitched everyone out. And I remember on a third ring road once, I stopped a fight with one guy with a padlock, with a steering wheel lock. So that was another turning point in my life as well, where I realized that I need to stand up for who I am and for the people who love me. But I also can't take every battle on, and I can't let it affect me emotionally. That sort of environment would give me a huge impact emotionally, because your adrenaline goes and you want to stop it, and you feel you have a duty, and you feel you're letting yourself down by not helping. And for me, I guess maybe it's maturity, or maybe it's just surviving here. That was a turning point for me as well, and one that my martial arts teachers gave me guidance on, but it's always a challenge, man, and that's one of the things that martial arts will bring you, incessant challenge, not just on the physical aspect, but on the psychological side. You'll be confronted with decisions and choices you need to make, and you're not going to get all of them right, but over time you'll learn to make the right decisions with the guidance of a good teacher, and those will make you a better human being, a better man, a better human being. And I mean, I remember the other day I just woke up and I felt a sense of gratitude to all my teachers and to China, with all this China bashing that's going on, I'm like, you know what, China and the teachers I've encountered in China and the contexts and challenges I've encountered in China have made me a better human being. So I feel gratitude for that.
Yeah, for sure.
I need to go to the bathroom, dude.
All right, I'm going to pause this then, and then we shall continue when you...
How's this going? Is it going...
Okay, so we're back with new drinks and new energy.
New energy, courtesy of Jack Daniels.
Jack Daniels this time around.
The official sponsor of the Drunken Boxing Podcast.
I wish. I'm open to that.
Or any of the other, maybe Jack Morgan or...
any of the other, Jim Beam.
Yeah, Jim Beam, any of those guys.
Yeah. If we could get some Japanese whiskey to sponsor, would be perfect. But
oh my God, don't get me started. Yeah. Oh.
Anyway, so I mean, you were getting onto that. You at that time you stayed after you decided not to go to Rome. You had been here for a year, and then how long did you stay on after that? At
what day is it today?
Oh, okay. So it never ended.
All I will say is this: you could be in China your whole life and not even scratch the surface in terms of learning. So if you feel the need or the interest to learn more about China, then come, and stay as long as you like. There's so much to learn. And things change so quickly here that there's always something going on. There's always something new to learn. And so for me, that's what's kept me here, I got swept up in my career I got involved with mixed martial arts, and
But how did you transition into mixed martial arts? I mean, you were in the Beijing Sports University for what, 3 years at that time?
yeah, 3 years, and so I left the sports university.
You said you had, before we move out, you said you had a good story about Men Huifeng.
Okay, yeah, Men Huifeng was like the head of the wushu school, the wushu college in the sports university. Him and Zhuiqi and Shuai Jiao were the top guys. Zhuiqi is the Sanda Nanquan guy.
Yeah.
Shuai Jiao, I don't know what he does. I honestly don't know. But Men Huifeng, you know, him and his wife, they had a lot of students from all over the world learning Tai Chi, and they would all come to the sport university.
Well, Kang Guixiang is...
Kang Guixiang is a Chen stylist, and I'm not sure about her lineage
Yeah.
or Man Huifeng's, and I know there's a lot of politics there and a lot of animosity from the traditional community towards
Well,
those.
Men Huifeng I know more about, and the reason why I know more about his background is because Men Huifeng and my teacher studied Chuo Jiao Fanzi under the same teacher, and that's Wu Binlo. Wu Binlo is pretty famous.
We know in Changzhou or
He came from
Changzhou.
from Hebei, yeah. So it's called Yanqing, you know, and it's a mixture of Yanqing stuff of Chuo Jiao and Fanzi. And Wu Binlo was a famous guy here. A lot of people know about his history, but they were both doing Chuo Jiao Fanzi with Wu Binlo. So we know that Men Huifeng is a Chuo Jiao Fanzi guy. I don't know where his Tai Chi practice came into it, but I think that was after, as far as I know, after he had already been involved in the...
no, I mean, the key thing to remember with Men Huifeng is that he was a member of the government apparatus.
Right.
And there was a point in Chinese history where actually learning and practicing wushu was illegal.
Yeah.
Unless it was through the government, you know. So he was in a position where he was a government representative, and a lot of those traditional martial artists were doing something that was illegal. And in places like Changzhou, the practice continued because they all had courtyards. And
Even with my teacher, I mean, the practice continued during that time in private.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And in Beijing, there were a lot of people and not a lot of space to practice. But in Changzhou and Hebei province, everybody had a courtyard.
Yeah.
So they could maintain their practice. That's why today, Changzhou is like a cultural refrigerator for martial arts. And I spent almost a year and a half going there every weekend to learn traditional martial arts in Changzhou. And that was a sensational experience. But when you talk to those people, they're very guarded about Men Huifeng, saying that this tension existed, government versus community, and also that in the effort to create something for the government, there was a lot of appropriation of different techniques and methods.
But never mind appropriation and misrepresentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's leave it at that. So his reputation is mixed.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. So my story about Men Huifeng, I have a couple of stories. I slammed a door on him once, and I don't want to tell that story. That was an international incident.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not shitting you. It was an international incident. I don't want to tell the story. Doesn't make anybody look good. Okay. So, but I'll tell the story. And what it was is a group of Japanese Tai Chi competitors and practitioners, maybe 20 or 30, and they came to Beijing, and they were learning with Kang Guixiang, and they were learning with Men Huifeng. They were just learning, you know. There was another lady, Wu style lady, Wang Peishen Wu style, Zong Weijie, and she was a wushu coach here as well. So they were learning a lot of different stuff. So I was sitting down just watching them outside my dormitory, and Men Huifeng was leading them, and he was doing Ye Ma Fen Zhong, which is like part the horse's mane on the
wild horse's mane.
Oh, okay, I forgot. Yeah, Ma Fen Zhong. Okay, the wild horse's mane, parting his mane. So he was doing it on the right side, and all the students were on his left side. So he was doing that, and he was kind of looking at his students. I remember this so vividly. Anyway, I'm watching him from behind, right? So I see his back, and there's this rat that runs out from behind him, and it's just crossing the courtyard. It's running quite quickly, and it's crossing the courtyard, and it goes to run right beside him, and to cross the courtyard. And without even fucking looking, while he's doing Yemaf and Zhong, he just goes, "Doosh," and stomps on it and kills it instantly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then just keeps going. And everyone was like, no way. And, you know, it reminds you of all those old stories like Yang Lu Chang with a bird sitting on his hand and the bird couldn't take off, all those. Yeah, that's bullshit. And then I saw Meng Hui Feng do this, and I was like, holy shit, mind blowing.
Poor rat didn't have a day there.
Yeah, just splat, you know. So I always remember that, and I think that story, probably in Japan, is being told thousands of times, and it's probably part of the Meng Hui Feng legend.
He probably killed a wild wolf.
Who knows? Yes.
That's probably what the story.
And 100
evolved
years
to.
from now, who knows what that's going to?
Yeah.
That's going to be canonized in some Taiji Chuan document. Yeah, that was amazing. That was in the Beatty in probably 97 or 98.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. There are lots of good stories of the TU Dashu.
Were there other international students staying there at the same time you were there?
Yeah, lots of really cool people. Luke Benza from Gabon was he'd been in the sports university since he was 14, and this charismatic, smiling, energetic, positive,
bigger than life laugh,
larger than life character who was really fucking good at martial arts. So for all of us, he was like this guy. He was the big brother for all of us, and I lived two doors down from him for 3 years. And great guy, positive energy, and we all looked up to him. There were, who else? We had so many people come through, all sorts of national teams, all sorts of high-level competitors come through, Chinese as well as foreign. I met Zhao Changjun there, which was a dream come true for me. I remember I woke up early one morning, I looked out my window, and I saw this guy just hanging around outside, and I was like, I rubbed my eyes, and I'm like, is that Zhao Changjun? And I raced downstairs because I had this magazine with him on the cover. Yeah. And it was the magazine I collected. It's like from 1991 or something like that. And I went downstairs and I said, Mr. Jiao. And he turned around and I said, can you sign my magazine, please? So he signed it. And I met all of those guys, basically. They all at some point came through the TU Dashu to certify or to do something. So it was just this great experience. One of the most impactful people I ever met was nothing to do with martial arts though, and still a friend to this day. He's also about 86, 87, you know. Professor Li Yangge, who was a professor of volleyball, and he was actually the guy who led the Chinese women's volleyball team to 5 consecutive world championships. Wow. Which is a rare feat in sport, you know, 5 world championships in a row. Not many sports have that record, and the Chinese women's volleyball team have. And he was the chief technical consultant for the team. And Lumping was a member of that team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Lumping was actually one of his athletes that he developed from the age of 14. So he's a guy who I've maintained contact with because he's fluent in English and just this powerhouse of thinking behind what it takes to coach a good athlete, a good team, and what it takes to win a championship, but most importantly, what it takes to stay a champion. So I've, as a professional, as an adult, I've kept in contact with him and used him to talk to the teams that I work with in a professional context, to talk about, okay, you're number one now, but how do you make sure you're number one next year?
Yeah.
And all that opportunity came through.
Oh, interesting. And that was through, and you met him there while you were there.
Yeah.
Wow. But I remember when I was at Shuai, probably 15 years ago, and I saw their volleyball team, their athletes that were there just doing volleyball. And the one thing that struck me about the women's volleyball, they looked genetically modified. Literally. I mean, they had the world's longest legs. I mean, their hip level came like up to here. And then it was just, they were huge.
Well, I mean, let's get back to what I was saying to begin with. You're too tall, Michael, to learn wushu.
Yeah.
So you got 1.4 billion people in China, and a government sports system that goes right down to grassroots in the local area, and every kid who fits that profile for a volleyball athlete is going to be funneled into a volleyball program.
Mm-hmm.
And that kid, he fits the profile for a wushu athlete.
So he goes there.
Yeah. And that kid, well, you should just keep doing mathematics.
Yeah.
Or that kid there, you look like you could be a good wrestler. He gets funneled that way. So when you get to Shuai, the Beijing Sports School, or the Beijing University of Sport, it's a school of freaks.
Yeah.
Everybody is weird in some way. You see the weightlifters, and they all look like weightlifters, and you see the rhythmic gymnastics girls, and you're like,
oh, they were underneath me in Shuai. Oh my God.
When you say
like
underneath,
the gymnast.
do you mind defining that?
No, not that kind of underneath. They were the floor below at the old wushu hall in Shuai. But I'm talking about even the little kids, and I used to sit down there and watch them get tortured. A literal torture. That was
well, in our eyes it's torture, but that's,
I think in their ways it was torture too. I mean, for sure.
The things you do for a gold medal, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they wanted it though. You know what I mean? Those kids didn't want it.
Those kids, I mean, the reality is a lot of them are in that position in that school because of their parents and maybe the financial position their parents are in. So
yeah, that's true.
And a lot of those kids were in that school, and they realized that it wasn't easy to be there, and so they just wanted to keep their parents and their coach happy. So yeah, absolutely. In the Western world, if you took a video of that, put it on Twitter today, it would be
totally.
A huge outcry. Like if you can imagine somebody in the splits, but with the front leg on a chair, like the front foot on a chair. And they're still in the splits, back leg flat against the ground, front leg raised about half a meter off the ground, and then the teacher just sitting on them or pushing them, and the kids screaming. Yeah, that was a daily occurrence in the sports university because we used to share a space with
the
gymnasts. And we just blocked that out. The first month you're there, it takes some getting used to. The second month you're there, you notice all the older rhythmic gymnastics who are gorgeous. And then you just focus on that from there. Use it for motivation to jump higher and train harder. Yeah.
So you went from there into other fields. I mean, you finished 3 years there.
Yeah, so I finished there. I was still doing Yi Quan. I was still going to Changzhou on a weekly basis to learn Kung Fu in Changzhou. And Changzhou, I learned so much. That was where I first encountered Shuai Jiao.
Really, over there?
Yep. I learned Shuai Jiao with an army champ there. And I also learned Qingpingjian there, which I with an inheritor, which I was excited about. And I don't know how most people learn the sword in the rest of the world, and up until that point, it'd been mostly through forms for me. So I got to Changzhou and I'm learning Qingping Jian with this inheritor, and he's created these. He built them out of horse whips, sword length, leather covered, and we sparred.
Yeah, that's the same thing my teacher used to do. They used to make their own little,
Yeah.
with leather covered
Yeah.
pieces of wood, or even, you know, so.
Oh, we weren't wood. He was using these horse whips with the leather part cut off, so it was just a cane part on
Right.
the inside and then covered with leather. And so for me, learning with him was painful,
Yeah.
but always insightful. And it was really a great experience, very combat oriented. And by that time, I was already at that point where I had enough of forms. I'd already started learning jiu-jitsu at that point too, and I was just focused on the gong side.
Yeah.
So for me, I encountered in Changzhou, my main things were Qingping Jian, bit of Shuai Jiao, and Baji Quan.
Mm-hmm.
And Baji Quan, I was like, don't teach me the form. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I want to learn the gong. So I
Gong, the
learned,
skill developing practice.
yeah, like all the conditioning
Right,
practices
right.
and all of
The repetitive skill building
yeah,
exercises.
yeah, and some of the the fighting side of things. That's what I was interested in, and it worked really well. It worked really well because I was there and I would teach English in an impoverished school there. And in the afternoon, I would go and learn Kung Fu. And in the evening, I would get trashed with all the Kung Fu guys.
But I mean, that's part of the culture that
Yeah,
people don't
yeah,
realize,
yeah.
you know? That's as much as part of the culture as the traditional skill itself is.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of got addicted to that, I have to say. And after about a year and a half of that, I was like, okay, this has got to stop because the getting trashed part is overtaking.
But you can't do it all the time, though. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, this has got to stop. I've got to come back to some sort of balance. And that's what I did. And from there, I sort of frankly lost my respect for a lot of the Chinese martial arts that I was seeing and just thought, okay, I had enough. I'm doing jiu-jitsu. I started boxing, started doing Muay Thai. I would spend 2 weeks in Thailand twice a year just doing Muay Thai at the World Muay Thai Council camp there. And I was boxing here with an ex-pro boxer and doing jiu-jitsu.
So at that time you were with Andy.
I was doing jiu-jitsu with Andy. And I was like, okay, I've had enough of routines and Chinese martial arts. The only thing I care about is combat. And that's where my sweet spot was.
Yeah.
That's where I felt like I was most able to express who I am, and where I felt like I was normal, not some tall dude pretending to do
Acrobatic stuff.
Yeah. So I was actually in that state of mind for a while until I met Li Baoru.
But if you, in hindsight, if you had started off doing, for example, my family's bagua with your height, I remember my teacher used to tell me like his stories, and my teacher is almost the same height as me. He's not a small guy. He's almost the same, as tall as I am. We're like maybe a couple of centimeters different. So even in his youth, when he was slim and very active and training very hard, he always used to tell me, he's like, because Xing Yi was his main art, and he's like, Xing Yi is an art that uses your whole body weight, we use our whole body weight to generate force. So he used to tell me his whole life he was trying so hard to get fatter. Well, of course, when he was younger, his metabolism was much faster, so he couldn't. But he said he was deliberately trying to pick up weight because he realized if he picked up weight, he'd be stronger in terms of the techniques that we use. And that's so different to the sport wushu that is. And this is the mentality of like the classical arts in China: bigger, stronger, faster. That's gone. It's
Well, historically, think back Does the name Wang Ziping mean
Yeah,
anything
of course. And he's a big dude. He's
Wang
not a
Ziping,
small guy.
He was renowned across China for his ability to beat people up to fight.
Right.
And he was a big guy.
Right.
And the reality is, I mean, we know this through professional boxing and everything. The bigger you are, the harder you are to kill, and the more effective you're going to be as a combat athlete. And okay, so that sounds wrong, but there's a reason why lightweights and heavyweights don't fight in the same ring or the same octagon. So in a combat art, really how tall you are, how much you weigh, is not really an issue. But in a performance art or an art that
well, that's using gymnastic techniques.
Yeah, then how tall you are is a limiting factor.
Because how heavy you are is a limiting.
It took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was lucky that I'm very athletic, and so most people my height are not as athletic as I am, and so I was lucky in that respect. But I really felt at home with the combat side of things. It fitted with my personality, it fitted with who I was at that moment. And when I encountered Li Baoru,
and that was only because Chet came through and
exactly. And so actually we made a deal with, this is interesting. So in Shuai Jiao, they don't have the ceremony of bowing to a master and drinking tea and then you becoming a disciple of that master.
ceremony. Yeah.
So that culture only exists in some martial arts circles and some other circles, but in wrestling, it doesn't exist. The only person a wrestler bows to is the emperor or your mum and dad. That's it. So there are some wrestling traditions that have this Baisha ceremony, but they're kind of warped interpretations.
Or it's something new, right?
Yeah, so it's new. It's been influenced by something else in the community, but the tradition is you have a teacher, you have a coach, and you learn what's good for you, and you pass it on, and it's a very honest tradition. And Li Baoru, for example, doesn't hold anything back, and his teacher didn't hold anything back. So we have this way of operating, and Chet and I actually signed a contract with Li Baoru.
Really?
Yeah. How weird is that? So we go there. We met him the first time, and he says, "Oh, okay. Where do you stay?" We stay over here, and he goes, "Okay, I'll meet you in Ritan Park on Tuesday in the morning at 6 or something like that." Okay, we'll see you there. So Chet and I turn up, and Li Baoru says, "Okay, I'm gonna teach you guys." And we're like, "Yay!" And he goes, "But let's write a contract right now." And in the contract, he wrote, "I'm going to teach you everything I know. And in return, you're going to promote and preserve
Shuai
Jiao in English." And that was the deal. And Chet and I signed. And we made a deal. And a deal that I still to this day, that deal is still in existence to this day. And so what I did is I walked away, started learning, and I went and started a website called shuaijiao.tv.
Oh, okay.
And that became very popular in Shuai Jiao circles. It became a sort of a hub for knowledge from China to get out.
A resource.
Yeah, and I started posting videos and posting anything to do with Shuai Jiao, and started learning. And I'm like, wow, didn't pay a cent. I've never paid a cent for Shuai Jiao.
Really? Li Baoru didn't want money?
Not 1 cent.
That's very different to most, huh?
Never.
Yeah.
I've paid for learning. Like I had some other teachers I paid, but also they would do it for free. But I paid them because I can, and because I one guy, I invited him to come to my house like twice a week, and we would just train downstairs from my house, and he's a very, very accomplished wrestler. And
Who is that?
李德顺, 双雄, double hero.
Okay.
So great guy, a Muslim guy. Him and his brother. His brother's a freestyle wrestler, and he's a Shuai Jiao guy. And I knew him through Master Lee, and another guy who really open-minded guy, likes to have a laugh. Shuai Jiao means the world to him, and so I started training with him, and I was like, look, I want to take it to the next level. Let's work out, let's do something more, and so I got him coming over to my house, and we just got really into the nuts and bolts of things, and I was in a position where I could pay him for that, But in terms of promoting Shuai Jiao, I feel I've got a duty to do that. And I've got all of Master Lee's old photographs, and I've got all his writings, and I've failed thus far to publish anything apart from on shuaijiao.tv, which is now taken down. But I still feel that duty, and it's going to happen sooner or later. Sooner or later. Yeah.
You got time?
Well, I'd like him to see it before he goes, so he already knows, Michael's done a lot. So he feels like it was a fair exchange.
Okay.
And I still see him. And while I don't practice, I still am in touch with most of those wrestlers, and still in regular contact with Master Lee. And I think, like your teacher, he's more than a teacher. He's like a father figure.
Yeah.
For me, a grandfather figure, and a source of wisdom, and source of positivity, when you encounter things, because he's been through so much in his life.
Yeah.
And he overcomes everything with a smile and hard work. And so, it's been a gift to meet him and to know him, and it wouldn't have happened without Chet. Unfortunately, I remember with Chet, I was talking to him. Chet goes, Mike, my goal is to speak Chinese as well as you, and I'm going to do it in 1 year. I was like, okay, whatever. And because he's a bit of a linguist, right? He likes to learn languages. He speaks 5 or 6 languages already. And I was like, okay, well, if that's your goal, in 1 year, I'm going to throw you. Anyway, a year later, I threw him, but he still couldn't speak Chinese. So I think he was so involved with jiu-jitsu in the early days, and he just didn't have the time to dedicate to training. Whereas for me, I stepped away from jiu-jitsu because I knew everybody, and there was some competition and some ill feeling between different skills, and I was just like, I don't have time for this. And I just dove into Shuai Jiao, and wow, that was what I was looking for when I was 18. Shuai Jiao was what I was.
So if you had found it earlier,
wouldn't have looked back.
Right.
Wouldn't have looked back. Wouldn't have considered anything else. If I'd found it when I was 10 or 12, that would have been my life's goal.
Right.
Yeah.
And Chet is a pretty accomplished martial artist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really it's so weird how fate works. I mean. When I started jiu-jitsu like 4 years ago, it's almost 4 years now, and I was thinking it wasn't ever anything that I was like, I don't want to do my practice, I want to do something else. I still love my practice. I just thought I need to find out what the hell's going on the floor. Maybe it'll be fun to go learn some of that stuff, because we don't really have much floor fighting. So let's see what it's all about. And I couldn't find any other jiu-jitsu. I only found Chet.
Oh.
I mean, that wasn't like I was looking for Chet. I just found Chet. I was like, all right, gave him a call. He's like, he was terrible with like emails and he was terrible.
He's not very communicative. He's on his own. He's got his own priorities, his own way of working. And
so I get in contact with him. He tells me the address. I show up there. I'm like, I don't have an outfit. He's like, it's all right. I'll give you one. I'll give you a gi. You just wear a gi for today. I'll lend you a gi. He brought it with, put it on, tried it, found it really interesting, and I only found out much later that he was like, yeah, I did Shuai Jiao, I did some Chinese martial arts. I'm like, oh, you did Shuai Jiao? And then he mentioned, yeah, I know this guy who does Bagua, is Jiao Da Yuan. I'm like, it's my uncle. It's like, it's just so weird how fate crosses these paths.
Well, actually, he mentioned you to me. He's like, okay. Hey, Mike, do you know this guy? And I was like, no. And he goes, well, maybe he's full of shit then. No, he didn't say
Sounds
that.
like...
He didn't say that.
It sounds like something he would say.
He was like, oh, I've got this guy. He's a great guy. And he's a wushu guy. You guys should meet.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I actually knew about you before I met.
Oh, okay.
And I think the first time we met, you also knew about me, because I remember you coming and saying, hi, you're Michael, right?
Yeah.
We were at Baoru dumpling
place. Right.
Yeah.
That was when Chet had already left and he'd come back for that seminar.
Yeah.
And I also remember it was like, I realized it was you. You know how I knew it was you? Because you arrived to the seminar in a Shuai Jiao jacket. I was like, that's him.
Like, who goes to a jiu-jitsu seminar in a Shuai Jiao jacket? What color belt is that? It's a red belt. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, I rocked up with the Shuai Jiao jacket on to a jiu-jitsu seminar. And I'd been doing jiu-jitsu for years.
Yeah.
And I just threw my gis away because I was like, okay, take up space.
Yeah.
So...
but the thing is, though, I think in hindsight, if I went to any of the other gyms instead of Chet's as my first place, I probably wouldn't have carried on.
I don't know.
I don't think so, because I have a different mentality about martial arts, and Chet has a very similar mentality. He's
Well, I think the what you're talking about is the difference between jiu-jitsu as a martial art versus jiu-jitsu as a sport. And Chet is very true to the jiu-jitsu as a martial art sort of school, and I'm down with that. I'm down with that. I think that's how it should be taught. And jiu-jitsu as a sport, great, nice to have, a lot of fun, great way to test yourself, but don't forget that it's a martial art, and don't forget that it's character building, and don't forget that there's a deeper level. There's a deeper level at play than just getting a gold medal. There's a practice there. There's something more there beyond just the sport. And I think Chet's true to that.
Yeah, for sure. And there's something that I noticed the first day I went to him, and there's it doesn't matter what he's doing. I mean, he's displaying something, and he's displaying it on you or whatever, and suddenly that switch goes in him, and you can just see a very focused intensity that just comes out of him. A lot of people don't have that, and that was one of the first things I noticed about him.
Well, I mean, that's one thing I struggle with. I mean, we talked about it earlier. I mean, I only like to be in those contexts. I don't like to be in contexts where that intensity is not there.
Right.
Because I feel like I'm wasting my time.
Yeah.
I feel like it's removed from reality. There's no sense of urgency. There is no awareness that this is a combat art, that this is a combat sport. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know where that intensity came from. Maybe it's part of me being ADHD, or maybe it's part of what I grew up with, the environment I grew up with. I think when you practice a martial art, you should do your best. And when you practice a technique, you should do it to completion. Not halfway, not half-assed, full power, full force to completion. Right? After you've learned it, that's how you should train it. And I believe that, and I believe how you train is how you fight. And most people don't have that way of approaching training, and for that reason, I feel like there's a disconnect between a lot of the schools I go to and where I feel comfortable. So, for instance, in most jiu-jitsu schools, I feel quite comfortable because people they roll and they know it's a combat art and they know they know, right? They know this is a life and death thing you're playing with right now, and they there's that sense of awareness and urgency and also respect. There's like this balance there.
Yeah.
You know, so you're not trying to rip the other person's head off.
Yeah, it's a controlled thing, but
you at the same time you know what's what.
Right.
You know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's where real strength and character comes from.
Yeah.
Putting yourself in that situation day after day after day, and that sort of reminds me of something that Hickson said. That Hickson came to Beijing and he sat down with us after a session one day, and he said, doesn't matter how much money you have. You could come to the gym in a Porsche or you could ride your bike. But when you step in the gym, you put the white gi on and step on the mat, you're all the same. And you all have to make a decision. Are you going to be a lion or a mouse? And every single time you step on the mat, you make that decision.
Yeah, that's so true.
And he said that to me and it went straight to my heart. And I'm like, man, he just put that into words. So any martial arts context I approach right now is in that, like, what am I choosing to be now?
Yeah.
Lion or mouse?
Yeah.
And I try to make the lion decision. Doesn't always happen, but I try to do that.
Yeah.
And I think coming back to Chinese martial arts, I think we don't have that mentality when we practice, you know. Like, hang on, choose to be a lion. Now at Shuai Jiao, when you step in the ring, they won't use the word lion, they use the word emperor. So as soon as you step on the mat, or step in the pit, or step in the ring to wrestle with somebody, I mean, it's a sports psychology technique that they've known forever, right? You're the emperor. That opponent is nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
And in Shuai Jiao, they teach you that. They teach you that way of thinking, that mentality.
Well, I mean, that's odd, though, because, I mean, that's how my teacher teaches me. And that's why I think I have a really hard time with a lot of Chinese martial artists, but it's because of what my teacher teaches me, the way we practice, all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes through combat.
Yeah.
You don't get it any other way.
Yeah.
You don't get it any other way. But see, that learning and that approach and that training then creates a part of your character that outside of martial arts is stronger, is more confident, is more able to contribute, especially when things are not so good.
Right.
When there's pressure, or when there's an emergency, or when there's an ethical dilemma, you can stand it. You can stand up and you can lead.
I think that's very true. And I mean, it's really funny that, like, I mean, Xing Yi is a direct art, right? And that's the art that I practiced at heart the most, you know? And my teacher's a very direct person.
You mean in terms of personality?
Just everything. The personality,
I mean,
the way he
I think you're very direct.
Exactly.
And I was like, is this a South African trait or is this a Xing Yi trait?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Or is it my teacher that's just rubbing off?
Does everyone from South Africa like Xing Yi?
I know. So that's the thing. I mean, I'm very direct too, and I don't know what it's attributed. Is it my teacher, or is it my art, or what is it?
Okay, so analyze yourself before you started Xing Yi versus now.
Oh, I'm much more direct. But I've also spent a shitload of hours with my teacher, you know.
So is this the art or is the teacher?
I don't know. Was it both? I don't know. Did I choose Xing Yi because I had this character, you know, that affinity already? Did I choose the teacher and stay with him because of... I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, but it's interesting to think about, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, when I think about Shuai Jiao, I have this attitude towards my life that comes from Shuai Jiao. And in Chinese, it's 只能通过实战提高水平. That means that you can only improve yourself through fighting.
Right.
And it doesn't mean fighting, it means exposing yourself to reality.
Right. Testing yourself.
Testing yourself against reality.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can improve yourself. And, you know, Li Baoru would say that to me. Like, Mike, that's the only way you're going to get better. Test it. You know, if it doesn't work, we'll figure it out.
Right.
You know? But you got to test it. You can't sit on the sidelines. You can't
And ponder about
You
it.
can't be afraid.
Right.
You know, you've got to live your life that way, make mistakes and learn from them. And so I think since I learned Shuai Jiao, I've certainly tried to embody that, and my character has changed in that way. I make far more mistakes now, and I'm way more willing to take risks and learn from those risks as a result of my Shuai Jiao training. You know, so it's interesting. You know, you got to think about it. You're spending all this time with your teacher. You're spending all this time practicing your art. In terms of your character development, in terms of your life, how is it changing you? As a kid, I didn't get that. As an adult, I see it. And I feel a responsibility, you know, to kids now to encourage them to find a way to gain that sort of learning for themselves, you know.
Yeah.
So that's my retirement plan, you know, maybe when I'm old and back in New Zealand.
Do you find yourself wanting to be there, or do you want to stay here?
I love New Zealand. I would love to be both sides. My wife is from Beijing, so I love it here and I love it in New Zealand. But I would love to get kids who are maybe a little bit underprivileged, or they don't have access to the same resources that other kids have, and teach them to wrestle.
Actually, I think I watched a movie maybe 2 or 3 years ago about a chess team from New Zealand of underprivileged kids. And some guy started, I think it was New Zealand, in fact I'm pretty sure it was, and he built them up to become a very you know, go to a championships and you know,
well,
do
see,
really
those lessons
well.
those will last a lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean with chess you have to start learning when you're a kid. When you're like 3 to 5 years old, you start playing chess and you start building that capability. So those cognitive changes that happen when you learn chess and you practice those tactics over and over and again, they'll last a lifetime. You know, and those kids will be set up for life in terms of how they think, how they encounter and solve problems, how they think about pressure, and all of those things will be you know, so much better as a result of that. You know, and I think it's the same with wrestling. Wrestling for me is like physical chess.
Well, it is.
It's a chess game, but when you make a mistake, it hurts. And that's great. You know,
it hurts both your ego and your body.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I've been injured so many times, and Li Baoru, once again, his response to injury is a lesson in itself. His response, because he's trained so many sort of national level competitors and like national level judo competitors. His response to any sort of injury is like, okay, carry on. Oh yeah, that looks pretty bad, carry on. And so I mean, I remember I dislocated my thumb and I walked over to him with this big long face saying, Mr. Lee, I think I hurt my thumb. And he looked at my thumb and he goes, it'll be okay, carry on. So I looked at my thumb again, and then I looked at the guy I was wrestling, and I went back and I wrestled him.
Okay.
There's only ever been one time where he said, stop, I think you should go to the hospital now. And that's all he said. He's like, I think you should go to the hospital now.
Oh, really?
So I came off the mat with this big trail of blood. I broke my nose and split it right across here.
Oh, okay.
Actually, a guy he's in New York City right now. Zhang Weidong. He's a Xing Yi guy.
Zhang Weidong? I do know the name. Yeah.
Zhang Weidong is a Xing Yi Bagua guy.
Yeah, I know him.
And Zhang Weidong gave me a huge headbutt across the nose, split my nose open and broke it. And I was like, okay, game on. Right? And Li Baoru stopped us and he said, I think you should go to the hospital now. And I was like, oh fuck, it must be serious. because I'm used to him just not giving a shit, right? Like, carry on.
And when you went to the hospital, what did they do?
10 stitches across my nose, 2 black eyes, and I had a job interview the next day, and I got the job.
Well, just remember the first rule about Fight Club.
Yeah,
do not talk about
Fight. Yeah, see, I went to the job interview, right, and I was like, okay, I can't tell them the truth, or else they'll judge me for being this barbaric fighter.
Right.
So I told everyone that I hit my nose on a basketball ring.
Well,
and they're Americans, right? So they're like, what? Yeah, I hit my nose on the basketball ring.
You got some
You can jump that high?
Air time.
Yeah. And I was like, I just shrugged my shoulders. And so I got the job, So, but yeah, the first time I ever went to a job interview with 10 stitches and 2 black eyes and still got the job.
Oh, good. Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah. So I think, in terms of martial arts, it's going to affect your character sooner or later, and you need to decide what that effect is going to be. And in the mixed martial arts, people are not aware of that, and they're making the wrong decisions. And this is something that concerns me a little bit. When you see people like John Bone Jones idolized, there's something wrong there. This is not how martial arts should be. And people with that sort of behavior, there's something wrong there, then there needs to be a correction in terms of how we all think about martial arts. So I hope he manages to find his way back to being that role model and learning lessons he needs to learn. We all go through our own learning process, but there's kind of a disconnect, I think, right now in the martial arts community.
And there's also a throwing away. I hate to say it, but there's a throwing away of the value of a lot of these older martial arts. There is value in them.
Well, that's what I'm saying, man. Yeah. Like, do you feel that it's okay to call yourself a martial artist today? Because society and the MMA trend has thrown away what it means to be a martial artist. So those guys are martial artists. Well, you're not.
They're fighters.
Yeah.
They're fighters. And I mean, if I have to throw away everything that is not suitable to today's environment, there won't be much left of Xing Yi. I mean, for example, we do a lot of weapons. Why do we do them? There's no point to it anymore, right? I'm not going to be able to go out and use a sword anymore. But it's more than that, And that's not an excuse that it's not going to be used, that you should practice it incorrectly. Now, that's the other side of the spectrum, And for me, I think that there's like, for example, I mean, Xing Yi, we do a lot of spear. Okay, you could argue that a spear is useless, especially the size of the spear that we use. I mean, so you're really not going to get a chance to use something like that. But my empty hand became better when I started to do spear. And I'm not just talking about my Xing Yi performance. No, I'm talking about my body mechanics, my power generation. And honestly, when I started doing even jiu-jitsu on the first day, the guys that I rolled with, they said the same thing to me. There's something different about the way you move. It's not normal, like a guy who just walks in here. So to say that there's no value, there is value. You just got to find what the value is, And for me, it's that plus other things, It's not just that. So I don't know what the answer is to.
I mean, the answer is simple. The answer is culture deserves to be preserved, and it might not be everybody's calling to preserve culture, but there's some people like you and like me who do feel obliged to sacrifice. And it's not a sacrifice, it's a pleasure to spend our time learning and promoting that traditional culture. So I'm that person, like you. I believe that there is value in preserving that tradition for future generations. And what disturbs me is it's very difficult to find Chinese parents who are willing to let their kid learn Chinese wrestling.
Yeah.
They would sooner send their kid to Taekwondo.
Yeah, everyone's sending them to Taekwondo.
Or to Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. I mean, I love Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
But, hey, if I'm a Chinese parent, and I will be soon,
yeah,
my kid's going to learn wrestling.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because there's 6,000 years of history there.
Yeah.
And something that you can learn that grounds you in your culture. Like, so this is a whole nother level like, this grounds you in your culture. This is your identity.
But even if it's not your per se culture, it grounds you anyway.
Absolutely.
And it's got a value to the person that learns it in any case. Even if it's, I'm not a Chinese, but I've been engulfed in this culture and this environment since I was a teenager, like in full, you know? I mean, can I say that it's not part of my culture? No, it is part of my culture. Unfortunately, what people want to try to define as cultural appropriation, I don't really care. That is what I know. That's all I know. You know, that's what I've grown up, and my formative years were in Chinese environments doing Chinese martial arts. That's what I know. That's me. That's what defines me, unfortunately. But I
would never say unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately for the naysayers that want to say that it's got nothing to do with my culture or whatever, you know, so...
I mean, those people are probably... I mean, I encounter them as well. I don't pay any attention to them because, I mean, we're at the point in time in our human evolution where we are globalized.
Yeah.
You know, and we, like, come on, man. Aliens are going to visit us sooner or later. And when the aliens come and talk to us, they're going to ask us about human culture, right? They're not going to ask us about New Zealand culture or South African culture.
Yeah.
They don't care. You know? So, you know, think about that. You know, there is no reason why, and culture is inherently human anyway.
Yeah.
Just because you're born in some place doesn't mean that you're going to be, you're going to understand the cultural traditions of that place. And I would endeavor to say you understand more cultural traditions than most native-born Chinese people. You know, and I'm the same when it comes to martial arts. Anyway, when it comes to martial arts. Everybody in China likes to think they know more. I mean, when I first got here, oh, you're learning Kung Fu? Let's arm wrestle. Like, literally, every second, if it was a dude, every second person would want to arm wrestle with me. And I would say, okay, what's that got to do with martial arts?
Well, my first trip to China, which is interesting for your background, is to Inner Mongolia, which is where my wife is from.
Yeah.
And everybody there, the first thing, so you do Chinese martial arts? Good, let's wrestle. So everyone was trying to wrestle with, because the wrestling is part of their culture there in Inner Mongolia. So, yeah.
I think, you know, there's no monopoly on culture. And I mean, we see Chinese people that go and learn things from the West and apply them here. And I feel proud that I've had the opportunity to learn some of the most outstanding parts of Chinese culture and apply them to myself and my life. Yeah. And I do plan to take those things back to New Zealand and to teach them.
Oh, that's great.
And I do hope that I can publish and promote Shuai Jiao beyond what I've done now.
Yeah. Well, I guess on that note, we're getting close to 3 hours, actually.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Can you believe it? Went by really quickly. So, any last stories you want to share? Any last words? Anything that you wanted to say but you didn't get around to saying?
I don't know. I mean, I would have to listen to what I've said because I can't remember a word. But I would say this, that anyone who's thinking about coming to China to learn martial arts, quit thinking about it. Start planning for it. Make it a reality. Come here with an open mind, not so open your brain falls out, but open enough to you know, follow coincidence, follow fate, and don't be afraid to try lots of different things, and don't commit yourself to one particular way. You know, your way is your life. That's what you commit yourself to. And there are lots of teachers you're going to encounter, and not all of them are ideal. And I would just say, have the courage to quit thinking about coming here and start planning for it. And then when you come here, you'll find that there's a group of people like us who have been down a lot of different rabbit holes and made a lot of different mistakes, and we're very willing to help and advise and connect and encourage, so quit dreaming about it, get a second job, buy a one-way ticket, not a return ticket, a one-way ticket, come here and commit. So that's what I like to say.
All right, well, that's good advice. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, man.
It was good to have you.